How would you like it if some home-wrecking big titty flower bitch started flirting with your dusty ass old man? Hello, I'm Mia, an average no-life webtoon reader. We are going to talk about the most popular romance webtoon this time. Drumroll. Lore Olympus. And listen, bitch, I tried to be fair, I tried to be kind. I tried to read this with an open heart. Did I succeed? You be the judge. We've all heard things about Lore Olympus, and I had to see for myself, you know? I really did that to myself, I really did. So just like last time, I'm going to give a full summary of the entire comic from beginning to end, and then my review. If you want to skip to the review, go here. The summary will have spoilers because it is the entire comic. I'm just telling you everything, okay? If you have a friend who wants to talk Lore Olympus with you, or better yet, if you get into an argument with someone about Lore Olympus and why you hate it, and they're like, but you didn't even read it, now you know a bunch of tiny details that you can say to them to pretend you did read it. So this way you can hate properly. Anyway, I tried to look like a spring goddess. Persephone, watch out. I'm coming to take your old man. All I have to do is act vulnerable. Hey Hades, my dad left me. Hey Hades, how do you open up a bank account? Hades, I got a B on my last exam. He's mine. Like, he's literally mine if I do any of that. I want to thank y'all so much for the response on my Down to Earth video. It's been crazy for me. I've never had a video get attention like that, and I really appreciate it, and I want to welcome all the new subscribers. Or should I say haters? If you are the author of Lore Olympus or an associate of the author, leave this video. My opinion is exaggerated for dramatic and vaguely comedic effect. I play up my real opinion. I wouldn't say this is constructive or worth watching unless you are a certified hater. Take all of my opinions with a grain of salt and read the story for yourself. I am just a random broke bitch on the internet. Lore Olympus begins with Hades flying solo to a party because his non-exclusive girlfriend Minthi ditched him, claiming it's embarrassing to be seen in public with him because of his deathly smell. At the party, Hades meets with Poseidon, Zeus, and Hera. Hera is thrilled he came without his nymph trash. Hades is too focused on being the only king without a date to call out her racism. Meanwhile, Persephone borrows a dress from Artemis to attend the party, though she ends up feeling more self-conscious than anything. Artemis coaxes Persephone out of the stall while Hades tries to leave early. Persephone's drink spills, which causes Hades to notice her. Zeus informs him that she's Demeter's secret daughter, and Hades remarks that her beauty puts Aphrodite to shame. Aphrodite, hearing this, angrily summons her son, Eros, from an orgy to play a prank on Persephone. We love a close family. Eros approaches Persephone and gets her super drunk, and then reluctantly plants an unconscious Persephone in Hades' car. The plan is that Persephone will be drunk and embarrass herself, so Hades will lose interest, and Persephone will see Hades as a creep. It makes literally no sense. Hades realizes she's in his car and gently carries her inside, gives her water, and reassures her that he won't snitch to Demeter, given the two don't get along anyway. As someone who isn't an age gap fan, there are quite a few scenes I find uncomfortable. Persephone is shown to have super tiny hands and feet, her feet being smaller than Hades' palm. She looks toddler-sized and doesn't even come up to his fucking waist. She cries about her mom finding out she was drinking at a party, which feels very reminiscent of a child begging not to be told on.
Don't tell my mom, alright?
In the morning, Persephone explores Hades' cold, permanently nighttime mansion, running into Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld. She charms the dog easily, and Hades shoos him away. Seeing that she's cold, Hades gives Persephone an expensive jacket that he originally bought for Hera, claiming she didn't like it, so it's getting no use anyway. While they have coffee together, Minthi, Hades' somewhat girlfriend, calls and is sent to voicemail. Persephone asks who Minthi is, and Hades claims she's just a nymph he associates with. Bitch. She wonders if they're lovers, and this conversation ends up with them flirting back and forth. Because yeah, you find out the guy you're interested in is seeing someone else, and he doesn't want to admit it, and you're just like,
wow, that's so sexy.
When Persephone finally asks how she ended up there, Hades explains he he found her in his car's back seat. She wonders why Eros did it, and Hades admits he pissed off Aphrodite. They flirt some more before leaving so Persephone can get home and Hades can get to family brunch. Paparazzi catch them as they leave. Hades drops Persephone off, and Artemis, who is also Persephone's roommate, makes him leave before they can talk much more. He did give her his business card though. Artemis clearly hates Hades, but Persephone reassures her nothing happened, and Artemis ends up giving her an old cell phone for future communication. Eros visits to apologize for putting Persephone in Hades' car, assuring her that he was just following his mother's bidding and has no personal grudge against her. How kind. During the visit, Artemis keeps adjusting Persephone's clothing because she's not wearing any pants, which I guess is supposed to highlight that she's very naive and not very careful around men. Like, oh look, she's so innocent. Okay. Eros figures out that she has a crush on Hades, and Artemis wants to know why Eros is listening to Aphrodite's every whim. Eros explains that his mom sent him to curse a human woman said to be more beautiful than Aphrodite. He fell for her beauty too, but she was due to marry an older rich man. Eros crashed the wedding in disguise and took her to his apartment, where he proceeded to pretend to be a wealthy merchant. They fell in love, but he would not let her leave the apartment. Her sisters were finally allowed to visit and found everything suspicious, and told Psyche to stab Eros. Which, queen shit, honestly. They're like, girl, we don't trust him, kill him. Don't even wait for anything to happen, just kill him. That night, she snuck into his room and saw his wings and gasped, waking him. Heartbroken at the sight of the knife, he fled to his mother and confessed everything. He told his mom he didn't want to see Psyche anymore, but now he does, and Aphrodite won't reveal her location. Artemis rightfully criticizes Eros for kidnapping and Stockholm syndroming a human into loving him and then abandoning her. Persephone comforts him though, while feeling she will never experience love. You know, Persephone, it did say a lot that you heard this story and you thought it was a love story. They exchange numbers and Eros forcibly takes her shopping after she mentions she's never been before. At this point, I find Eros insufferable. He feels like a stereotypical gay best friend character with added misogyny. Persephone laments over Hades not responding to her text message, admitting she felt important to him. I forgot to mention, Persephone's text message to Hades was just hi, no context. So he thought it was spam. In the next chapter, we see Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus hang out at a strip club they were banned from. Hades bullies the hostess, and side note, I hate when characters are mean to service workers. And the brothers discuss Hades and Persephone and the logistics of them having sex. This scene really set Hades up as a gross old man. I'm having trouble rooting for them while constantly being reminded not just the age difference, but the difference in maturity and life stages, especially after seeing Hades talk about an 18-year-old girl's ass in a strip club. I mean 19. Big difference. Hera appears and overhears the brothers talking about Persephone and chastises all of them, but particularly Hades for coveting a very young woman. She expresses disappointment in him, which makes Zeus jump to Hades' defense. That's the guy you want defending you from accusations of, like, misogyny. Eventually, Hades guilt trips everyone by saying he didn't want to talk about this in the first place and leaves. Poor Hades. Content warning for sexual assault. I will keep the description of these actions extremely brief, like this message is probably longer, and will not show any images that depict any harm. If you want to skip this section altogether, go here. Persephone and Artemis meet up with Apollo, Artemis's twin brother, and Hermes. Apollo immediately finds Persephone attractive and acts like a creep. Persephone is uncomfortable with him and tries to get Artemis to stop him from visiting their house, which apparently has a no men allowed policy. Artemis brushes off Persephone's discomfort, so Persephone finally decides to give Apollo a chance as a friend. Following this, he assaults her that very night. Persephone tries to convince herself it was her choice and retreats into her mind until it's over. Apollo also took a picture of her in the act without her consent. Afterwards, Apollo just leaves and a confused Persephone takes a shower, cuts her hair, and texts Hades again. Scene over. A flashback shows 5-year-old Hades celebrating his birthday with his mother, who suspiciously looks a lot like Persephone. Kronos arrives, and despite Hades' mother's best efforts to hide him, finds and eats Hades. Hades wakes up from this nightmare memory and decides to see a therapist. Good for you. He sees a missed text from an unknown number again and realizes it's Persephone. He convinces himself that just talking is harmless and calls her. They banter and he notices that she's been crying. Their conversation was cute, and I found myself kicking my feet a little, despite myself. He gives her a very nice pep talk that she's a great goddess of spring. Persephone clearly doesn't have many people in her life that she feels she can confide in. She asks why he isn't married yet, promising that he can ask a personal question of her at any time in the future in return. Hades explains his early romantic options were very limited to just Hera, who was with Zeus, Hestia, who took a vow of celibacy, and Demeter, who Hades did not get along with. Demeter, Persephone's mother, by the way, I'm not gonna lie, the fact that Demeter and Hades could have had a sexual relationship some 2,000 years ago is very fucking off-putting. Persephone asks why he's not with Hecate, and he says working well together doesn't mean they're compatible. These chapters love to ruin any semblance of a cute back and forth between the two leads with constant reminders of their age gap. Like, the author is good at writing chemistry between characters, but just has to ruin it with this age gap fetish. She asks if he's seeing anyone, and he thinks of Minthy, but says no like a true scumbag. Persephone also admits to being single, and they fall asleep on the phone together. Hera and Zeus get into an argument because Zeus wants her to talk to Demeter about Hades being with Persephone. Hera's daughter watches their toxic argument, and when Zeus storms out, Hera's young daughter Hebe brings her a gin and tonic. This is not cute. Hera reflects on a so sad portrait of Hades and decides to give him a chance. Persephone visits, and Hera tasks her with applying to become Hades' intern. Before Persephone leaves, she shakes hands with Hera, and Hera can feel that something horrible has happened to Persephone, though she's not sure exactly what. Later, Hades confronts Aphrodite about her prank on Persephone, but they make amends. We learn through their conversation that Aphrodite is hiding Psyche as a nymph, though it's illegal to have mortals in Olympus. Hades doesn't care. I felt that Hades is often portrayed in this as a misunderstood soft boy and other times a ruthless businessman. What's confusing about it is that he's not portrayed as being soft only for Persephone, but misunderstood in general. And then his ruthlessness comes out only when he's dealing with someone of a lower standing than him, like humans, service workers, etc. Anyway, Minthy confronts Hades at work for ignoring her. They argue he's disappointed she abandoned him, and she points out that his family hates her for being a nymph, and she didn't want to be around that. Sorry, but I agree with her, because Hades never defends her or shuts down their comments. He was apparently about to propose to her, so presumably he feels serious about her, yet he couldn't protect his potential future wife from ruthless comments about her race, essentially. Hecate comes and separates them, sending Minthy away. Hecate then confronts Hades about tabloids that show Persephone leaving his house, and then reveals Persephone's only 19. Hades realizes he's willfully ignored all of the signs of her age and didn't consider how these rumors would affect Persephone's scholarship or reputation. Typical. I just want to say I am most definitely 100% going to get many of the names wrong. I did look up how to pronounce them, and I've been pronouncing them wrong my entire life. Just go easy on me, okay? I'm illiterate. Zeus's assistant, Thetis, who he's having an affair with, turns out to be Minthy's friend as well. She calls Minthy and informs her about the tabloids, which causes Minthy to confront Hades again. Hades reassures her that nothing is going on between him and Persephone. It's worth noting that Hades and Minthy are non-exclusive, and Minthy is positioned so far as a gold digger. Meanwhile, in class, Persephone's classmates show her the tabloid to ask if that's her. They're like, bitch, this you? She admits it is, and she doesn't seem to know what it means to sleep your way to the top, further emphasizing how naive she is. But don't forget, she gets perfect grades in class, and she's an academic genius. Persephone offers to study with her classmates, and when she leaves, she's accosted by Apollo, who got her schedule from Artemis. What the fuck, Artemis? You know she's uncomfortable around your brother, so why the fuck would you give her schedule out? Just in case anyone finds any mention of the assault that happens triggering, I will flash a brief warning anytime it is mentioned, and you can mute the video for that portion, and then I will take the warning away once the scene is over. He drives Persephone home, and she tries to tell him what happened between them can't repeat, and she didn't enjoy it. He insists that she enjoyed the assault, which rightfully angers her. I really enjoy how you can see her hairstyle changing as she gets more stressed. It's a very cool visual that I've liked a lot so far. Cerberus appears and stops the car, so Persephone leaves with the dog to go hang out. It was cute. The next morning, Apollo is in Persephone's apartment again. Despite Artemis's alleged no men allowed rule, Artemis, you stinky hypocritical bitch. He's your brother, not Persephone's brother, and you know they don't get along. Persephone goes to Underworld Corporation for her first day of internship. Minthy, who is also Hades' secretary, by the way, my guy just loves his uneven power dynamics, denies Persephone access to see Hades, and after Persephone begs, she sends her to a sketchy location where she says she can run into Hades. During a meeting with Thanatos, Minthy, and Hades, an alarm goes off that means someone breached Tartarus. Minthy is shocked because she didn't think Persephone would actually go that far, and Hades immediately goes to save Persephone. This sequence leads to some gorgeous panels. The art really shines here, and this scene is famous for a reason. I really think so. After rescuing Persephone, Hades gives her a tour while Minthy fumes at their closeness. After Persephone showers, she reveals to Hades she's supposed to work for him on Hera's orders. Hades refuses, citing safety concerns, and she challenges him to a game of chess. If she wins, she gets the job. She deliberately acts ditzy to lower his guard and then crushes him. Hades shows Persephone around the entire company, and everyone notes how odd it is for an intern to get a tour from the CEO. Minthy catches them flirting, and although she notices Persephone hasn't snitched on her yet, she confronts Hades and they argue again. Hades storms off with Persephone to drive her home. Apollo watches angrily when Persephone gets dropped off because he believes Persephone is his. Once home, Hades argues with himself about his feelings for Persephone. He appreciates her lack of fear towards his status, which is crazy to me because Hades loves throwing his title around. And yes, a billionaire heiress goddess has the privilege to not act afraid of you, unlike all the service workers or your employees. We get a brief flashback of what happens the day Minthy refused to go to the party with Hades. She found a ring in his pocket and panicked because she felt unworthy of being queen. She's of a lower class and knows the other gods will make fun of her, and they're not even in a public or exclusive relationship. I do think that it is a little unhinged for Hades to propose out of nowhere after the two of them clearly established they were just in a friends with benefits situation and that's it. This is the kind of thing that even in a committed relationship you need to discuss beforehand, especially if you're going to do it in public, in front of your family. She ends up at Hades' apartment and begs him not to leave her. Minthy gets very emotional and Hades acts sweet, but he thinks of Persephone the entire time, even when they have sex. Hades writes an unsent letter to Persephone as advised by his therapist to organize his feelings. He admits he might be in love with her, but knows it's insane since they've only known each other 4 days. He feels ashamed, and although he's not in love with Minthy, he feels she needs him, unlike Persephone. Persephone gets confronted by Hestia about the tabloids. Hestia being the leader of the goddesses of eternal maidenhood, Persephone's weird celibacy scholarship. Hestia only forgives her after Persephone gives away the coat that Hades gave her. Hades decides to give his relationship with Minthy a real try, and puts his letter away, vowing to keep distance from Persephone. Yeah, let's see how long that lasts. Hades decides that he still must protect his little spring goddess, so he hires 3 Medusa-looking bitches to find the tabloid photographer. Hades goes to a warehouse with Hecate where the photographer is tied up. Hecate suddenly supports Hades and Persephone as long as he's serious, but he's questioning his decision to be with Minthy. Then they torture the photographer together and remove an eyeball. Back at the Persephone and Artemis apartment, Hermes comes over. Apollo manipulates Artemis into confronting Persephone about not taking her duties seriously and having a man over. Persephone retorts that Apollo is always over, so Artemis switches to warning her that she should stay away from Hades because the kings don't treat women well. Persephone nearly reveals Apollo's assault, but stops herself and leaves for work. She arrives at the office with Hermes, making Hades jealous. Hecate shows Persephone what she needs to do for her job, and after Persephone runs into Hades, she tries to give him baklava she baked for him. He refuses in order to keep his distance from her. Minthy comes into the elevator and kisses Hades in front of Persephone and makes a catty remark. The comments tear Minthy apart for being insecure and kissing Hades in front of Persephone. But bitch, that's her boyfriend, who is having an emotional affair with another woman. How would you like it if some home-wrecking big-titty flower bitch started flirting with your dusty-ass old man? Persephone gives the baklava to Hecate, Hermes, and Thanatos. Much to Minthe's displeasure, Hecate makes Hades give Persephone a tour of the rest of the building. He starts out cold, but they quickly make up and start flirting again. So all it took was 30 seconds for them to go right back to being inappropriate. Because reminder, again, Hades is in an official relationship now. Paparazzi question them about their relationship, and Persephone has a visceral reaction to the photos due to her memories of Apollo taking photos without her consent. Thanatos and Minthe confront Hecate about Persephone's lack of qualifications, but Hecate dismisses them. She claims Hades has nothing to do with her decision-making, and this isn't a high school. And that's just a fucking lie, bitch. That's a lie. She's trying to play matchmaker, and it's not like Minthe and Thanatos are wrong. So back the fuck off, my girl. Hades shows Persephone where mortals wait for the afterlife. She gets upset about the 100-year wait for those without coins, but Hades remarks that he didn't become rich for nothing. We love a capitalist king. A bunch of humans mistake Persephone for a fertility goddess, which she denies. Hades suggests she talk to her mom about it. Zeus and Hera start talking about Apollo, but Zeus dismisses her concerns and says she can't ruin Apollo's reputation off baseless accusations on behalf of some nobody goddess. Hera rightfully spits in his face. Persephone is stressed about the idea of being a fertility goddess. Thanatos watches on as the pair awkwardly solidify their friendship. Hades promises to protect her, and she apologizes for crossing any boundaries. She grew up with flower nymphs who did everything together and is still adjusting to how reserved everyone is on Olympus. Hades asks her how she ended up in the fourth tower in Tartarus, but she doesn't want to tell him yet. Minthe and Thanatos meet in a supply closet, where he tries to kiss her, but she says she can't do that anymore because her and Hades are exclusive. The villainized girlfriend has way more self-control than our main couple. Just saying. They decide to still be friends and discuss Persephone's special treatment. As Hades and Persephone are saying goodbye and flirting again, Minthe comes by to mark her territory. Persephone excuses herself and runs away crying. Bitch, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. That ain't your man. Like, bitch, go to a retirement home and find yourself another Hades. Like, it's not that hard. Persephone arrives home to a cake that Artemis made to apologize, and the two make up. Artemis struggles with Persephone's dislike of Apollo and recalls how Persephone and her came to live together. Hestia had told Artemis that there was a new goddess to join their virgin sex cult, Demeter's daughter. Artemis spied on Persephone and saw she was very sheltered, and Demeter was a helicopter parent. When Persephone was awarded the scholarship to Olympus, her mother tried to make her commute instead of dorming. Artemis interjected to offer her place for Persephone to stay. Demeter refuses at first, and then there's a huge argument where she storms out. Side note, look at how tiny Persephone is next to her mother. Why does she look like a toddler? A few weeks later, Persephone wrote a letter to Artemis saying she finally got permission to live with her. Artemis remarks to Hermes how weird it is that Persephone's name means bringer of death. Hermes seems to know something but doesn't tell Artemis. In his mind, we see him recall Demeter cutting him a check and telling him to never speak of what he witnessed, and she appreciates him lying to Hades about the amount of souls he collected. In the present, Persephone admits her crush on Hades to Artemis, who's like, girl, what the fuck? Eros appears suddenly because of this admission of love, and Persephone ends up privately confiding in Eros about Apollo's assault on her. Eros comforts her and suggests she sees a therapist. She spends the night at his house, meets his family, and creates a Facebook account to befriend Hades. Aphrodite comes home, discovers her crush on Hades, and goes on a racist anti-nymph tirade. She kicks Persephone out, who first wishes Eros good luck in his love. Flashing back to when Psyche broke Eros' heart, he went on a rampage and killed 300 humans. He got in trouble because he didn't have a permit for this act of wrath. Yes, everyone in this comic is terrible. Before Zeus hands out his punishment, Aphrodite stops him and seduces him into having sex with her instead of punishing her son. She located Psyche afterwards, who tells her the whole story. Instead of killing her, she decides to do an experiment to test Eros's love for her. Back in the present, Hades and Minthy plan a date night that they're both really excited about. Minthy decides to first get drinks with her friend Thetis, and that's the last we see of her before she ditches Hades for the date and leaves him on red. Hades decides this means he can read a letter Persephone wrote to Hecate, actually, and Hecate gave it to Hades. I don't know why he's suddenly acting like he needs permission to break boundaries, because bitch, you've been doing it the entire time. When Hades reads the letter, it says that Persephone is sorry for Hecate's visit being short, and she hopes the god of the underworld didn't have too much of a hangover. Hades is like, bitch, I don't remember meeting this hoe. So he calls Hecate at 4 a.m. She says Hades got super drunk visiting her while she was staying with Demeter, and they tried to hide him from Persephone, but she must have snuck a peek at him at some point. We then see why Minthy abandoned her date with Hades. Thetis, her friend who's fucking Zeus, got jealous that Hades and Minthy became official, so she manipulated Minthy into getting blackout drunk. Minthy wakes up distressed, but Thetis tells her to control her drinking. In the meantime, Persephone lies to herself about wanting a friendly call with Hades, though her real intentions are very clear. Hades ignores a call from Minthy to flirt with Persephone over the phone. Obviously, he was stood up, but he doesn't even know why yet. She could have been in an accident or something, and he doesn't care to check. Instead, he'd rather flirt with a teenager over talking with his girlfriend. Again, I actually do like their banter, but I hate two-timing, and I hate their relationship. After the call, Persephone decides she needs to start planning how to get out of the goddesses of eternal maidenhood. Persephone feels guilty using her scholarship money with no intention of staying in the weird virgin sex cult, so she decides to pay it back with her internship salary. Hades is so generously paying her a salary despite the fact that interns at his company don't get paid. I'm not upset at Persephone getting paid, I'm upset at Hades not paying his interns. Hades goes to the Three Fates to unlock his lost memories of meeting Persephone. He leaves while they get the tapes ready, and they see a future video of Persephone as queen of the underworld. Who could have seen that coming? Minthy comes to work a wreck and confronts Hades. He's scared to be alone with her as she verbally and then physically assaults him, while comparing him to his abusive father. Hecate stops her and comforts Hades, and their friendship is very sweet. I do like them together. I almost feel like the physical abuse came out of nowhere to justify Hades and Persephone's emotional affair, but whatever. Before I get roasted for supporting Minthy later on, yes, she did slap Hades. That's abuse. This world has a very confusing sense of morality that I'm going to address in full in the review section. For now, I'd just like to say that Hades and Persephone both commit far more serious acts of violence, as well as the other gods. They're seen as okay or encouraged. Hecate slapped Hades too, and that was okay apparently, so I forgive Minthy. I forgive her. Hera visits Hades after hearing what happened from Hecate. Hades tells Hera she can't judge him for his relationship when she can't even help him get married with her power. Honestly true, gag that hoe. Hera has no right to talk. Zeus fucks around every day, her marriage sucks, and she only cares about Minthy because she's racist. Somehow this leads to Hera kissing Hades. We see a flashback of Hades and Hera meeting after Hades had been alone for 13 years. She helped him with his injuries. This also somehow led to them kissing. In the present, Hades pulls apart and yells they agreed to stop doing this in the 80s. But Hera says she was feeling nostalgic and her and Zeus have been having problems. Hades drops Hera off at her house and goes inside, and then Persephone shows up. Hera invites them all in, and their dinner very quickly devolves into Zeus and Hera screaming at each other. Persephone and Hades escape to the gardens and flirt. And during their talk, she's all,
I don't want to forget my empathy for mortals.
bitch, you're 19. You haven't been alive long enough to forget. Persephone reaches and accidentally grabs Hades' hand because she's used to always holding hands with the nymphs. Persephone calls herself a stupid village girl, where Hades then says the iconic line,
Never apologize for being Sicilian.
They're also being spied on by Zeus, and he tells them to stop flirting in his wife's garden. They don't even try not to have an emotional affair. Hades drives Persephone home where they encounter Apollo. I appreciate that Hades asks Persephone if she wants to talk to Apollo before telling him to fuck off. Hades chases Apollo away, but not before Persephone secretly sends vines into Apollo's car to steal something. Thetis, Minthe's friend, sends a nude of Zeus to Hera anonymously, which leads to Hera arguing with Zeus. The fight gets intense, but Ares steps in to protect his mommy. Persephone thinks she might be pregnant and visits a gynecologist. The chapter accurately depicts how dehumanizing and invasive doctors' visits can be for women, but it is a little bit on the nose for Persephone to just straight up say it, like, girl, you already showed us, you don't need to say it too, just from a storytelling perspective. Persephone goes dumpster diving to find a laptop and plans to invite her classmates over to study. In the next chapter, Zeus and Poseidon visit Hades and ask how things are going with Persephone. He has the nerve to say there's nothing because he's with Minthe, and Poseidon actually points out that it sounds like Hades is having an emotional affair. Hades is surprised Pikachu at this, which is crazy to me. He wonders how much flirting constitutes an emotional affair. Bitch, if you have to ask, you're already having one. The subject changes because, of course, Hades won't confront this in a meaningful way, and Zeus suggests taking Persephone to be his bride against her will. Hades considers for a brief moment, but then decides he wants her love. So he's already considering marrying her and considered kidnapping her. I just hated this whole exchange. Like, what was the reason? Persephone's study session comes and goes with no one showing up. So in class, she asks this guy why no one came. He is the roommate of the guy whose eyeball Hades stole. Persephone is shocked to learn of Hades torturing a student. I just feel like the characterization for Hades is so mixed, it's just not consistent at all. At times, we're supposed to perceive him as a cinnamon roll who's sweet and respectful to everyone, and other times a brutal slave driver who only likes Persephone and no one else. Persephone goes to the Underworld Corporation to confront Hades only to see an extremely long line. On that day specifically, everyone gets an opportunity to talk to Hades. Persephone tries to cut to the front of the line like the entitled bitch she is, and someone stops her. Then she bumps into someone else who had coffee and spills it all over both of them. She finally goes to the back of the line and starts willing herself not to cry. Anyway, Ares appears and eggs her on. He honestly reads her like a book. He was drawn to her because he heard her declaration of war on Apollo, so he asks why she's angry. She decides to deflect by telling him why she's angry at Hades, and then they finally reach the front of the line. Ares admits he used his powers on Persephone to increase her anger, so Hades chastises him by saying she's not even a century old. She's not strong enough for godly games, but oh, she's not too young for you to want to fuck her? Huh? Hades creates a private dimensional space and takes Persephone there. Awaiting them is a feast and a dress he created for her. Hades justifies beating up the reporter because he disrespected Persephone. Paparazzi can be scum, but bro was really just doing his job, and I don't know if that warrants torture. Persephone easily forgives him and seems more concerned about the damage to her reputation than anything, finally realizing at this point why I hate them so much. I feel like I'm reading about a bunch of privileged old money shitheads who think they can do whatever they want. They're racist, classist assholes, and I'm supposed to ignore how they treat poor people, nymphs, humans, and service workers because they're not important anyway. Persephone apologizes too for flirting with Hades and claims she doesn't like Minthe, but she doesn't think anyone deserves to be cheated on. Bitch, you're already doing it. You're already way too physically close to him right here, in this scene. You don't need to fuck for it to be cheating. He says it's not her fault and he hates that she feels bad about it. He doesn't want her to apologize for her feelings, like, bro, you have a whole ass girlfriend, you suck. You really suck. Then says that he also has feelings for her, so they admit they like each other. Persephone asks to stop getting special treatment at work because she noticed she got a business card and interns usually don't. So Hades congratulates himself on hiding that interns don't usually get salaries either. They disguise themselves as doctors to visit the photographer in the hospital. Hades claims the photographer should be thanking Persephone since they're here to give his eye back, and the photographer reluctantly does. Hades then tells Persephone to leave the room, which she does despite the photographer begging her not to leave him alone with Hades. Yep, because she says the photographer should have been nicer to her. She watches through the window and gets turned on by Hades in his god form as he gives the eyeball back, causing all plants in a 500-mile radius to bloom. I guess she orgasmed? I really don't know. They leave the hospital and discuss boundaries, like, you stupid bitches don't care about boundaries, so why are we doing this now? No texting between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m., no touching, and no being alone together. An intern doesn't need to text a CEO regardless, but I digress. They bump into Hestia, who berates Persephone for being alone with a man. Hades pretends he was donating money to the goddesses of eternal maidenhood. He disappears and left a check in Persephone's name instead of the organization. Meanwhile, Zeus bumps into Ares and Aphrodite. Ares fights Zeus for sleeping with Aphrodite, but Zeus claims they weren't exclusive. Hades and Poseidon come to the rescue, but somehow things get worse, and Ares accidentally ends up hitting his mother Hera in the face. Hera sends everyone away, so the King brothers decide to go to the mortal realm to blow off steam. Truthfully, they're there so Zeus can sleep with his current human girlfriend. Hades goes for a walk and hears crying, which turns out to be a palm-sized dog that he adopts. Zeus's girlfriend's father ends up chasing him out, and the brothers end up at Hades' house. Zeus admits to being a bad husband, but Hades tells him to sleep instead of holding Zeus accountable at all for his treatment of Hera. Hades sends a Facebook friend request to Persephone and thinks he can't wait for her to see the new dog. The real reason we got this sequence of him adopting a puppy. He feels like he and Persephone broke up even though they weren't officially together, and wonders why. Bitch, it's because y'all were having an emotional affair. Shut the fuck up. In the morning, a call from Planned Parenthood thankfully informs Persephone she is not pregnant and has no STDs. Artemis invites Persephone to breakfast then that Apollo made. Though Persephone tries to avoid it, Artemis insists. Apollo corners Persephone to talk, and she recalls a childhood memory where Demeter stood up to Zeus about his cheating. More than Hades has done, honestly. He retaliated by lighting fields on fire, but Persephone uses this to gain courage to tell Apollo that she doesn't want to talk. Apollo confesses his alleged feelings for her, and she angrily rejects him. She puts him in his place, but Apollo continuously gets more confrontational until Eros bursts in through the window and rescues Persephone. Apollo leaves, and Eros introduces Persephone to Aphrodite's assistant, who is actually Psyche in disguise, unbeknownst to Eros. So I'm just going to call her Psyche, but remember that Eros doesn't know. They go to Aphrodite's house, where Ares flirts with Persephone, but she only wants friendship. Ares apologizes for messing with her the other day. They flirt a little bit. This is Hades' nephew, by the way. And Eros separates them, demanding to know their past. She admits a long time ago, where she was hopefully at least 18, she healed his wounds and they kissed. He knew right away back then that she was a fertility goddess because she healed him, and I guess that's like rare. Eros is relieved that the encounter only ended with kissing. Hades dreams about a domestic life with Persephone and a child. He decides to break up with Minthe. Day 10, by the way, of him knowing Persephone. He texts her to meet up, and Minthe knows instantly what's coming. She's been clearly having a bad time since their blowout argument and goes to party with Thetis instead. Finally, during a miserable outing, she realizes Thetis is a toxic friend and leaves to meet with Hades. She immediately asks if they're breaking up, which he confirms. She apologizes for what she did, but Hades stands firm that they've done this too many times. He says he doesn't want to be messed up together. He wants to be happy and safe every day, not just sometimes. She asks if he loves Persephone, and he admits he does, despite only knowing each other 2 weeks. Minthe believes Hades will come crawling back after it doesn't work out, but he says even if it doesn't, he and Minthe are done. He allows her to keep the apartment and her job. I think he was very respectful during the conversation, and I really liked what he said about being happy and safe all the time. Minthe, I feel, also reacted realistically, though she could have said some hard hitters that would have actually given him something to think about. Hades still hasn't had to fully confront the emotional affair, or how much older he is than Persephone, or why he has to go after vulnerable women. After Hades leaves, Thanatos and Thetis visit Minthe, claiming Persephone isn't who she seems to be. Thanatos broke into Hades' office to find dirt on her, and then broke into Persephone's house. He overhears Apollo and mistakenly thinks they're dating and then finds a ledger under her bed that could be incriminating. Unable to sleep, Hades goes to work early to get stuff done for once in his life. Persephone starts her first official workday but struggles with the software. Thanatos, who is working next to her, refuses to help because he says if she were qualified, she wouldn't need it. So true. I like this guy. Hermes comes by to say happy birthday to Persephone, and Hades is sad he didn't know about it. She gives him the check for Goddesses of Eternal Maidenhood to rewrite, which leads to Hades discovering she doesn't have a bank account. He takes her to the bank to open one and bullies the bank teller into not checking for ID. Persephone, of course, doesn't mind this. She also asks him about him and Minthe breaking up, which she feels guilty about, but he doesn't want to discuss it. Thanatos visits Hermes and Apollo to get more dirt on Persephone, but Hermes catches on fast and encourages him to quit the search. Apollo, however, offers to help Thanatos bring Persephone down because it'd benefit him too. Apollo drives Thanatos and a nymph named Daphne, who looks just like Persephone, to see Helios for more information on Persephone. Daphne thinks Apollo and Persephone went through a breakup, so she feels bad for him. Helios thinks they're asking about Rhea, Hades' mom, who is another Persephone clone. But when he realizes the conversation is about Persephone, he's like, oh yeah, that bitch's act of wrath was crazy. Persephone sneaks to the beach area where all the souls are forced to wait 100 years to cross over and starts handing out coins. She quickly gets overwhelmed because she doesn't have a lot of coins, and the shades all rush her. What did you expect to happen? Hades rescues her and scolds her for not asking for help and for hypocritically ruining his reputation after telling him not to get involved with her reputation. Persephone argues that his rules suck, which they do, but she's so fickle about when she actually cares about how Hades treats others. This somehow leads to them kissing pretty abruptly, which caused Persephone to turn into butterflies out of nervousness and fly all the way home. At work, Persephone demands Minthe teach her how to use the computer, and Minthe is like, bitch, why the fuck would I? Persephone threatens to tell Hades about Minthe sending her the wrong way on purpose on her first day, so Minthe reluctantly teaches her. Yes, bitch, blackmail the girl whose boyfriend you stole.
Yes, queen.
Persephone has a bad day the next day where it's shown her grades are slipping and Apollo and Hermes are hanging out at her house. She opens a birthday card from her mom, which makes her emotional, and then she summons Hades the way he taught her in the beginning, which is by stomping on the floor. She asks him to stay the night and they bond some more. Hades was very sweet in this scene, I'll admit. I can believe that they like each other a lot and they do have great chemistry at times. But everything else. The next day, Hades gets a delivery from the Fates containing his memory of his first meeting with Persephone. Meanwhile, Persephone encounters Apollo on a date with Daphne. She privately demands Apollo leave Daphne alone, threatening to tell everyone what he did to her. But he counter-threatens to show everyone the pictures he took of her that night without her consent. The author's art shines when depicting grief, and despite how sad this scene was, it was really beautiful. When Artemis goes home, she sees a note from Persephone stating that she went to visit her mom for a week, but then Demeter herself comes to the apartment, making it clear Persephone lied about where she was going. Hades watches the tape of the night he actually first met Persephone. He got drunk and crashed in a nearby house in Demeter's lands, and Persephone turned into a butterfly, snuck into his room, and they flirted back and forth. She gets surprised and turns back into her human form, and for some reason, she's naked. This bitch is 19 in the present, so how old was she when this happened? Persephone asks Hades if he can bring back mortals that died if it wasn't their fault, and Hades says it is not allowed, and mortals are a dime a dozen anyway. Demeter comes by to sober Hades up, so Persephone sneaks away. Demeter realizes Hades must have encountered Persephone at some point, and instead opts to get him blackout drunk so he'll forget everything. The season 1 finale starts to explain why a goddess of spring got the name Bringer of Death. Minthe, Thanatos, and Thetis are telling Zeus how Persephone got that name. Their version of events starts with Persephone and Demeter getting into an argument about living in Olympus. Demeter wants Persephone to stay home and commute to school, and Persephone believes she's being sheltered and craves independence. independence. Demeter grounds her, so Persephone angrily runs off. Flower nymphs come to check on Persephone, but she shouts at them to leave her. Suddenly, they start crumbling into dust, and Persephone runs to the human village nearby to find them digging up sacred flowers. Persephone has a scythe and tells the humans that for every flower they dig, a sister of hers dies. She chops the villagers' heads off, creates a huge tree in the middle of the village, and becomes very big. She starts plucking villagers while laughing maniacally as she stakes them on the giant tree. Zeus agrees that if this is true, Persephone must be punished. The Minthy trio want him to tell Hades, but Zeus sends them away. Back to Artemis and Demeter. Artemis hides that Persephone is missing until she gets Demeter to leave. She, Psyche in disguise, and Eros search Hades' house, thinking he kidnapped Persephone. I mean, he fell asleep watching the tapes of Persephone falling on him naked over and over, so like, it's not looking good for you. And they obviously don't find her in Hades' home. Hades looks for her in the underworld as everyone is becoming more worried because Persephone isn't answering any calls. Zeus is starting to feel frustrated that no one thinks him competent or respects him. His daughter ignores him, his wife is hiding something, and thinks he's stupid, and Demeter hid Persephone's act of wrath. The thing Hera is hiding turns out to be that Eros and Artemis begged her to disguise herself as Persephone to fool Demeter and prevent her from finding out Persephone is missing. It wasn't mentioned before that Hera had this power to transform into people, but okay. Demeter's fooled well enough, but Apollo tries to confront Hera disguised as Persephone. Hera threatened him to leave without finding out what he wanted to talk about, which seems like a missed opportunity. Hades enlists Hecate's help in search for Persephone, so they start checking local pawn shops for clues. Hades and Hecate get a lead at a pawn shop where Persephone sold a comb Hades gave to her. There's a lovely moment here where Hades threatens to bulldoze the shop because the owner has a privacy policy they aren't willing to break for a bribe, until he eventually calms down. The owner takes pity on him and tells him that Persephone seemed to have been in a hurry. In the beginning of the story, I felt like a lot happened in each chapter. But at this point, around chapter 124, I think many of the past chapters could have been condensed. This didn't need to be a whole chapter. The previous chapter didn't need to be a whole chapter. Apollo visits Hera's office to submit a marriage application for him and Persephone, but Hera rips it up and sends him away. Zeus, while running his own investigation, finds Artemis in the mortal realm searching for Persephone. Earlier, he had also run into Hermes to ask about the allegations. Hermes, who accepted a bribe from Demeter, of course lies and says he knows nothing. Apollo interrupts Zeus as he talks to Artemis, so she flees. Apollo takes the opportunity to ask Zeus if he can marry Persephone, which Zeus refuses as that's Hera's domain, and Hades likes her. Apollo mentions Hera has been disguising herself as Persephone and sneaking around, and offers his own help towards Zeus's investigation. Hecate and Hades see that an arrest warrant has been issued for Persephone and Demeter on the news. Hades and Poseidon confront Zeus in an emergency meeting, upset he did something this big without informing them. Zeus says if the allegations are true, multiple people have lied and hid this from them, meaning that people aren't respecting the three kings anymore. He wants to make an example out of Persephone. Hades believes making an example out of her is too harsh and storms out, which Thetis sees and takes to mean that Hades is angry at Persephone. She relays this information to Minthy and Thanatos begins to feel guilty at the idea of Persephone receiving a harsh punishment. Hades sees Persephone's tree growing out of control in Tower 4, where she was previously lost after being sent the wrong way by Minthy. He rescues her and takes her to his home, so she can be looked after by some shady doctors and Hecate. The doctors fear that because she's been overusing her powers, she may take years to recuperate and wake up. Hades wakes her up by whispering sweet nothings and talks of visiting Sicily. Persephone wakes up and Hades reassures her that he won't turn her into Zeus. After some time, she puts on a fancy dress and explains her side of the story. She says she always had a feeling in her chest that only grew with age. Her mom tried to control her, which only made that feeling grow even more. She held resentment at being her mom's cereal mascot. The day of the Act of Wrath, after the flower nymphs died, Persephone confronted the mortals about breaking the treaty and pulling flowers in a sacred area. The humans laughed at her and mocked her for being a flower goddess. Persephone sliced their heads off and blacked out. She came to covered in blood and began to have a panic attack. which led to her powers going out of control and her becoming Titan-sized. She, for some reason, chased the people running, and her large steps caused an earthquake. A giant tree formed in the nearby village, and she tried to evacuate people, but they were terrified of her. She agrees she messed up and killed people, but she didn't laugh about it, and she didn't impale anyone. Hades believes her, and she thinks he must think of her as a hypocrite. He says no, he thinks she's powerful. Bitch, what do you actually mean powerful? This bitch killed people in the lamest way possible. I feel like I would be embarrassed dying to Persephone while she's just big and crying due to her own incompetence. I already thought she was shitty, but now I think she's incompetent and shitty. At least in Minthe's version of the story, she did all that on purpose. She was competent. Hades confesses to watching a tape of the night they met and reading Persephone's letter to Hecate. They bond while watching the tape. Hades says he will always be in her corner because she's not afraid to be seen with him. The bar is in hell. You're in love with her because of that? Why aren't you in love with Hecate then? Is it because she's age appropriate? Hades shares info about his traumatic past with Kronos, who ate him when he was a child. He was alone in Kronos' stomach for 13 years until the day Zeus broke him out. He has a lot of trauma over it, so he relates to Persephone and her trauma. Trauma bonding! Hermes visits them, and Hades refuses to turn Persephone in. He has to go to work and wants her to stay home, but she insists on going with him, promising to keep a low profile. Persephone hides in Hades' office with a cloak of invisibility, and Minthe, thinking he's alone, tries to seduce him. He rejects her, and Minthe and him argue briefly about Persephone. Later, Thanatos witnesses Persephone take off the cloak of invisibility and hug Hades through their giant glass windows. Such a low profile. He thinks to himself that the Minthe trio is in deep shit if Hades still supports her. I don't get this because all they did was tell the truth of what they found. Like, the humans are probably exaggerating what happened a little bit, which is normal because to them she's a monster. The laughing and impaling doesn't even matter. The fact is she killed all those people and destroyed that village. Zeus calls Hades on Zoom, and it was entertaining to see all the gods' different personalities as they mess with their computers. I especially liked Hermes' background. Zeus demands Persephone turn herself in. She says he will have to initiate extradition. Hades terminates the call, and then Hera visits. She assures them she won't turn Persephone in. Instead, she came to talk to Persephone. Hera asks if Apollo hurt her, which Persephone confirms but begs Hera not to tell Zeus. Hera rightfully guesses that Apollo has something on her, and Persephone admits to the pictures he is blackmailing her with. Hera promises to fix this, and after she leaves, Persephone breaks down crying to Hades. He takes her to a rooftop to hit diamonds to create shooting stars. When we're eating the rich, I'm starting with Hades. Meanwhile, Zeus is upset that everyone is mad at him and puts Hermes under house arrest until Persephone's trial. Echo, Hera's assistant and Daphne's roommate, notice Daphne preparing for a date with Apollo. Echo warns her that she saw him apply for a marriage with Persephone, and he seems a little weird, but Daphne insists on judging Apollo for herself. Despite that, the date doesn't go well, so Daphne sneaks out of the bathroom, and that's when she runs into Thanatos. Thanatos mentions his dislike of Persephone, but Daphne is like, why do you care about Hades treating her special? I don't know, bitch, maybe because no one likes nepotism. She tells him to call her when he gets his shit together. Hera and Echo find Persephone's old phone at a hotel she stayed in. Hera calls Hephaestus, her son, to ask if he can delete the photos from Apollo's phone. He agrees, though the relationship between them seems rather strained. It must be her fault. Persephone calls Artemis to confess that she hates Apollo, but says nothing more. She asks Hades to take her shopping. She's nervous at first and tries to pretend like she gives a fuck about capitalism. Bitch, you are a billionaire heiress dating a billionaire king who exploits his employees and uses undead slave labor. Shut up. They flirt and kiss, which almost makes her turn into butterflies, but Hades calms her by reassuring her they can move at her pace. I do think the way Hades treats her sometimes is sweet. At times, it is almost enough for me to forget why I hate them. Demeter arrives secretly in the underworld. She visits Hecate to ask if Persephone is safe, and tells her the theory that Zeus wants her because she's a fertility goddess, and she thinks fertility goddesses have great power. She's worried that anyone who wants to overthrow Zeus might want to consume Persephone. But Hecate tells her there's no one who wants to do that. Of course, then we flash to a panel of Apollo. Artemis confronts Apollo about why Persephone hates him. Their mother, Leto, joins the conversation to help convince Artemis not to believe Persephone. Artemis gets upset and leaves, so Leto tells Apollo that she will visit the underworld to smooth things over between him and her future daughter-in-law. Hades has a nightmare of Kronos eating Persephone. She comforts him and reassures him that Kronos is trapped in Tartarus. However, we see her tree roots are spreading towards Tartarus and seemingly giving Kronos' skeleton a bit of life. Minthy cries in her car about Hades truly being done with her. She recalls their first meeting when she was about to be evicted. She got a job as a car showgirl where she meets the three kings and Thetis. Zeus takes Minthy's hat and places it on Hades, who gets upset and leaves. Minthy is later told she won't get paid for the job because of the missing hat. She angrily barges into Hades' office to yell at him for indirectly getting her fired. So he gives her a job in response. She says that doesn't solve her imminent eviction. True. To which he says, okay, let's go. The flashback is interrupted, with Thetis informing Minthy that Daphne and Thanatos are getting cozy. Thetis and Minthy attend a yoga class where Daphne is the instructor, only to see Thanatos is also there recording content for her. Influencer girl and camera-holding boyfriend. Thanatos tells Minthy she's hard to be around lately. Minthy overhears some girls gossiping, falsely assumes they're talking about her, and through an argument with them, she learns that everyone is talking about how lovey-dovey Hades and Persephone are. At work, Hades asks to speak with Minthy. She's hopeful that he'll want to get back together, but on the contrary, he wants to send her to a different department. He apologizes for her life being disrupted because of him and says it was short-sighted of him to put her in this position in the first place. Sir, Persephone is your intern. You are in the exact same situation. What did you learn? Minthy is pissed and begins running through the office to find Persephone. She yells out if Persephone knows he was going to propose to Minthy, if she knows he can't have children, if she knows about his drinking issues, which, by the way, we've seen no mention of his drinking issues ever since he got with Persephone. So like, I guess love cures alcoholism. Minthy admits to reporting Demeter and Persephone to Zeus, which Persephone overhears. She's like, you reported my mother to Zeus? Our lives are in tatters because of you? Like, no bitch, it's your fault your lives are in tatters. Like, you're avoiding extradition and living in a mansion, going shopping, getting catered to, living it up. But sure, tatters. Minthy didn't kill those people. You did. You're mad she reported you for mass murder? This bitch has no reason to be loyal to you. You stole her boyfriend and she found out you committed mass murder. I'd fucking report your ass too. Bitch got me so heated, acting like she has any right to get mad. Anyway, Minthy gets scared. She begins apologizing, but Persephone starts to chase her around the building. Hades tries to stop her. But, as always, Persephone loses control of her fucking powers again and turns Minthy into a plant. I fucking hate this bitch. Really, I do. She is so goddamn unlikable. Our lead couple spend a long time trying to turn Minthy back, but neither are able to. They seek Hecate's help, who is like, what the fuck did y'all do? Persephone says in a fit of rage and mild arousal, she turned Minthy into a plant. Bitch, what the fuck do you mean mild arousal? You weird ass bitch. Hecate is unable to turn her back either and says only Persephone can reverse it once she gets a better grasp of her powers. Like that's gonna happen. Artemis is upset that Eros and Psyche won't tell her what's going on with Persephone, so she goes to see Hestia and Athena. She realizes very suddenly that the two are a couple and have been hiding their relationship. Artemis feels betrayed by everyone keeping secrets from her, and later meets with Hermes. Hecate tells Persephone that Demeter is in the form of a bird in the underworld and advises her to see a therapist to help with her control. Hera has a nightmare and wakes up screaming that Kronos saw her. Zeus comforts her, and the couple realize that Hera's old wounds from the war have started bleeding. Dun dun dun. Persephone hosts a party where she introduces Hades to her family. Remember, her life is in tatters, everyone. She's partying in a mansion. Daphne and Thanatos attend the gathering where Persephone tries to warn Daphne about Apollo. But Daphne's like, girl, I already know he's a creep. Thanatos nervously watches Hades and Persephone's closeness, worrying how Hades will react when he learns that Thanatos participated in persecuting Persephone. Apollo's mother, Leto, then crashes the party. Leto tries to convince Persephone to give Apollo a chance, and Persephone is like, if you weren't Artemis's mother too, I'd smack the shit out of you. You know what? Good for you. Good for you, girl. Leto concedes that Persephone has made up her mind, so she must know about Hades and Hera's past then. The fact that Hades even asked Hera to be queen of the underworld. Persephone is distraught by this news. She spends the night comparing herself to Hera. In the morning, Persephone decides to see a therapist. She confides in them about her being an overachiever and the pressures her mother put on her growing up, how her mother planned her entire life. While that's going on, Hera sees a doctor about her scars reopening, who determines it's simply due to stress. The doctor is revealed to be on Apollo's payroll, as he later tells Apollo what he learned. Apollo pretends to be dropping by for a visit during this exchange and asks Zeus again for Persephone's hand in marriage. Zeus reiterates that his stance hasn't changed, which angers Apollo. Persephone tells her therapist about Apollo, and again the author's art shines, depicting Persephone's grief. Although this was a very ham-fisted way for a character to discuss their trauma, but I appreciated the fact that the conversation happened and the inclusion of therapy twice now. Hades greets Persephone with flowers after her appointment. It's sweet, actually. He asks if he upset her in some way since the party. Persephone admits that she learned about him and Hera hooking up. They discuss his past with her, that a long time ago he had feelings for Hera when the Olympic dating pool was microscopic. Hera was instrumental in the plan to stop Kronos, as she gained his trust to poison him over time. After the big battle, everyone except Zeus was scarred, so Hera and Hades found comfort in each other. Zeus noticed this and sent Hades away to be god of the underworld, which was allegedly uninhabitable and far from everyone, even though they all kind of just teleport all the time. Hera chose to be queen of the gods with Zeus instead of going with Hades, but eventually realized marriage with Zeus wasn't all that hype. They started their affair as an act of rebellion. I like that during their conversations, though, Persephone is honestly a good communicator and very, very clear about her desires. Hades takes Persephone back to Tower 4 inside of ancient Tartarus, where there is a pomegranate tree. As he was first rejected by the underworld's inhabitants upon arrival, the pomegranate tree spirit offered him the power to rule in exchange for something. He's not sure what it took, but he can't leave the underworld for long periods of time and can't have children in a traditional way. Which doesn't seem to matter much because everyone be having children in weird-ass ways in this anyways. Persephone comforts him and they discuss hypothetical scenarios about the pomegranate tree's power. It started to bear fruit again about 100 years ago, and he confirms that if Persephone wanted to truly be queen with him, she would have to eat the fruit. While that's happening, Eros and Psyche prepare for a job in the mortal realm. Thanatos and Daphne also go towards the mortal realm for errands. Hermes tries to get details about the night of Persephone's assault from Apollo, sensing something was wrong. Apollo avoids the questions and heads towards the mortal realm himself. The narrator tells us that one of these people will not return. Apollo tries to ask his mom about Persephone, and the two decide the only way to get Persephone is to receive her as a gift from Zeus. Leto says she has something that can help, and presents Demeter in a birdcage. Hades introduces Persephone to Hephaestus, who recognizes her from the pictures that he deleted from Apollo's phone. Ares arrives to tell them that Hera's assistant, Echo, wants them to visit because she seems unwell. In the mortal realm, Eros and Psyche in disguise grow closer and kiss. Thanatos and Daphne also grow closer. He asks her to be his girlfriend. Death flag for Daphne for sure. Thanatos drops her off and Daphne runs into Apollo. Psyche is upset at Eros kissing her and retreats to a cliff alone. She sees Artemis heading towards Apollo's direction, so she decides to reveal Apollo's true nature by shooting him with an arrow of hate. That's what it does. It just reveals someone's true nature to the next person to see them. Artemis turns at the last second, and Daphne ends up being the first one to see Apollo. Enraged, Apollo attacks Psyche, causing the tip of the arrow of hate to pierce her too. Eros saves her, but the arrow starts to reveal her disguise. Eros and Psyche have a tearful reunion, while Apollo is like, man, fuck this shit. Going back to Daphne. Psyche realizes Daphne will be in trouble as Daphne starts screaming that she knows what Apollo did. He tries to calm her, but she bites him and runs. Eros attempts to slow Apollo down, and Apollo hits him with an arrow as payback. Daphne screams she will tell everyone. She knows Apollo will kill her, but her plan is to make it back to Demeter's land, where she will hibernate as a tree until Demeter can turn her back. We cut to Thanatos waiting for Daphne to get off work, until Echo finds him and shows him Daphne frozen like a tree statue. Just before Echo got the news about Daphne, she was confronted by Zeus, who said she is forgetting her arrangement with him. Okay, double agent. She rushes out after getting a phone call about Daphne, which upsets Zeus. Apollo visits, however, to present him with the Demeter birdie. Hermes later delivers the news to our main couple that Demeter is in Zeus's custody and the trial starts tomorrow. The day of the trial arrives. Persephone is heckled by reporters as she walks into the courthouse. She meets with Demeter, who demands to know why she's so cozy with the god of the underworld. But Persephone in turn demands to know if she's a fertility goddess. She gets no answer. Hades confronts Zeus about rumors of Apollo marrying Persephone, but Zeus reassures him that he only said he would think about it to get Apollo off his back. Persephone nominates Hades as his lawyer. Okay, Mr. CEO with a law degree. Against Persephone's advice, Demeter decides to be her own lawyer. Hermes is witness number 1, and he testifies that he met Persephone while bathing in a river, and they started a friendship where he would bring her books. Then one day, he saw Persephone as a giant crying and a ton of mortal souls. Demeter bribed him to very slowly sneak the souls into the underworld over time. Thanatos is called to the stand next. He testifies about Persephone receiving special treatment as an intern. Hades has the nerve to be like, what special treatment? Girl, if you don't shut the fuck up. Thanatos says she was underqualified and got the job as a matter of nepotism, and Hades points out that Thanatos also got his job from nepotism. But Thanatos was like an actual child, so I don't understand the comparison. Thanatos admits to going through Hades' desk when Thetis bursts in and announces she would like to report a murder while holding Plant Minthe. Thetis confesses her own involvement but attempts to throw Thanatos under the bus. Thetis and Thanatos admit to breaking into Hades' house to steal Plant Minthe and breaking into Persephone's room to steal the ledger that implicated her in the mass murdering. Hades and Persephone have the gall to be upset at the breaking and entering, but you bitches are being investigated for a mass murder that you hid. You do not have a leg to stand on. Zeus reveals that the ledger has detailed plans to change the underworld, using this to accuse Persephone of wanting to overthrow Hades. Persephone says she was always planning on showing it, but wanted to flesh the plan out more. She wants to create Elysium, which is similar to our idea of heaven. I'm not a Greek god historiologist, but whatever. Since the underworld isn't very fulfilling, and as a way to give back for her crimes. Hades is furious on her behalf that Zeus saw her kindness as treachery. Hades then argues that Persephone is guilty, but she deserves a light fine or community service. He asks her to explain what happened the day of the massacre. She tells the story of mortals trespassing on sacred land and killing her friends. The gods agree that it's egregious for mortals to treat a god the way that she was treated. Hades brings up when Artemis and Apollo killed mortals on a whim with no permit and were praised for it. He's like, we do not give a shit about humans, so why are we fronting? At least he's real about it. Persephone will act like she feels so guilty and empathetic and then hang out with all these horrible people who do mass murder because they're feeling bad, just like she did. The trial is paused for 2 days. Demeter and Persephone argue about Hades, Demeter being upset at their closeness, Persephone being upset Demeter made Hades forget her. Persephone admits to being in love with him. Apollo approaches Hephaestus to accuse him of hacking his phone and tries to say that Persephone is lying. Hephaestus is like, I know what I saw. Hades overhears this. He asks what the fuck they're talking about. Back at their hotel, Hades approaches Persephone to ask if Apollo hurt her. She tries to avoid the subject, but he doesn't let up until she relents and tells him everything. Hades turns big and loses control of his powers, leaving with the intent to kill Apollo. Persephone stops him because killing a god is a big deal and she needs him right now anyway. Hades apologizes for his reaction, realizing he's making her comfort him. The two go to a spot in the mortal realm for comfort. They talk more, Hades apologizes again, and they fall asleep together in a field. They wake up to Helios watching them. Persephone demands to know how he could sell her out after she made homemade birthday cards each year for him, and he says her cards are not that important. king shit. Hades and Persephone flirt and discuss her plans for the underworld. I was almost starting to get swept up in their chemistry again, but then they pull shit like this. Hades reads like an old white Republican, and Persephone is a fake liberal who's trying to make him understand that poor people are people too. Girl, fuck you. Your beliefs are paper thin. Hades also admits to never having been Titan-sized before. Ares approaches Zeus to say that punishing Persephone makes no sense for diplomacy's sake, so Zeus must be preparing for war. Zeus wants to sequester Persephone so no one can use her to overthrow him. Meanwhile, Hestia and Hera visit Demeter, who is upset no one told her about her daughter's relationship. But then, Hestia's scar starts bleeding once more. The trial resumes with Demeter admitting to covering up the incident to protect Persephone, because Zeus never treated her fairly. Some random bitch bursts in and interrupts, causing everyone to literally tremble in fear. Cliffhangers like this one, because it was a cliffhanger between one chapter and the next, are crazy because everyone is gasping and acting shocked. Oh my god, we're so scared. But I, as the reader, don't know this bitch from nowhere. She was never introduced before, so the shock is completely lost on me. This character turns out to be Eris, Hera and Zeus's first child that they disowned because she was so destructive. She hibernates for long periods, then wakes up to contribute the most chaos possible while everyone tries to appease her. She's just like me for real, bro. Eris encourages Demeter to discuss Zeus's unfair treatment. Demeter says that Zeus always tries to hide his problems on her land, only to punish her if she doesn't want to help. He also wouldn't let her be queen of the mortal realm. She feared his problems with her would cause him to give her daughter Persephone a harsher punishment. Eris forces Demeter to explain how Persephone was born from 1,000,000 perfect roses. She got blessings from all the goddesses, but, unbeknownst to Demeter, Eris also gave her a blessing of wrath. This is why she has a voice in her head and loses her temper. Out of nowhere, Apollo shoots Eris to drag her away. Persephone takes pity and hits him, which allows Eris to escape. Apollo declares to everyone that he is Zeus's son from an affair with Leto. Zeus panics at this, as the cycle of a son overthrowing their father with the help of a fertility goddess is starting. Zeus announces his verdict. Demeter is stripped of her power and banished to the mortal realm. Persephone is banished as well, but also in charge of spring entirely, and tasked with turning Minthe back to normal and getting control of her powers. Zeus will only lift the banishment once she meets his conditions to his standards. No contact is allowed between Persephone and other gods, so there is no communication allowed at all between other realms and the mortal realm. Hades rushes to Persephone to confess his love before she's taken away, and everyone is mad at Zeus, as others have loved ones in the mortal realm too, but during Persephone's banishment, they aren't allowed to travel there. Hades and Hecate tell Zeus he needs to be prepared for the consequences of his actions. Poseidon and Hera also leave angrily, and that is the end of that season. I got this wig for a second, but I think it looks really dumb. I'm not a short hair bitch. I'm not. So, gonna put the other one back on. Not that it's a lot better, but 10 years later, Zeus's younger daughter Hebe tries to push for the banishment to be lifted, as it's not just a punishment to Persephone. Persephone is trying to prepare for Zeus's evaluation. She turned Minthe back from a plant, brought Daphne back from hibernation, and mastered spring. Zeus has failed them in the past for stupid reasons, so everyone is nervous. The nymphs give a gift to Persephone, a condom. How lovely. In the past, Zeus held a coronation for Artemis and Apollo to welcome them into the royal family. They each get one request from him. So Apollo requests for his mother Leto's banishment to be lifted. Artemis requests to be sent to the mortal realm. That means that she can't leave until Persephone's banishment is done. Zeus obliged this as he was happy to have Artemis as a daughter, dubbing her protector of young women. Persephone tries to ask Zeus to pass on a letter to Hades as it's the 10th year anniversary. Zeus fails her because she isn't supposed to have any communication at all. Persephone argues, but Zeus puts her in her place, to be honest. So sorry about it. Like, yeah, Zeus sucks, but... He leaves, and it's shown just how much Olympus has suffered because of the heavy restrictions on trade from the underworld. Apollo has also become a pillar in the community, but Zeus doesn't like him. Zeus hasn't had any contact with Hades for years either. We learn a few things. Hera got sicker and sicker until she fell in a coma. Poseidon also fell into a sleep sickness. Eris has been living with Persephone in the mortal realm too. They're chilling until they're interrupted by Cerberus, who runs toward them while injured. Everyone fears something happened to Hades, so all the nymphs and Artemis tell Persephone they want her to check on her man. Persephone gets her bag and leaves. She goes through a secret volcanic passage to the underworld by bribing Ares, who is on guard duty, with a date. The underworld is in shambles. All the citizens are asleep. She finds Hades' house a mess, but he got her birthday gifts every year, and she finally reads the letter he wrote to her in the beginning, the one to get his feelings out. She's caught by a possessed Hermes, who attacks her. She's rescued by Zeus, who tells her that it was Kronos. Persephone is like,
Bitch, explain everything, please.
Zeus admits that she is a fertility goddess. As a child, Zeus learned to use a fertility goddess's power to overthrow Kronos. Zeus has tried to hide this, but it's clearly not working, so they go to Tartarus together. Zeus says that he hasn't really seen Hades since he pissed him off by trying to give him a random pink bitch to marry as a Persephone replacement. Like, Zeus, you need to know, if you're gonna try to give a Persephone replacement, she can't just be pink, she also has to be vulnerable. Duh. She wants to know why he couldn't just let them be, but Zeus argues she's young and unpredictable. She could fall out of love with Hades and be with some other god who then gets all her power. The pair meet a random-ass dream goddess who's looking for her father. She tells them that Kronos isn't completely free as he has to possess other people's bodies. Persephone encounters a possessed Hades, who she tricks into getting lost in a maze. The dream goddess puts her to sleep so she can hopefully find Hades in his dream and then wake him up so he can take his body back. Persephone's dream starts as a nightmare of her being with Apollo, but it falls apart when she remembers her mission. She sees Hades with herself and 2 children. Reluctantly, she wakes him up. Forcing Kronos out of Hades' body has allowed him to take a giant form somehow, and he tries to kill Hades. Persephone protects Hades, but Zeus protects Persephone, only to get a serious injury. Ares and Athena come to help, allowing Persephone time to eat the Tartarus pomegranate that grants power over the underworld. This lets her become Titan-sized with a new fancy dress, of course. What follows is actually the absolute worst boss battle I've ever read, and I've read many. Normally, if an artist can't draw fight scenes, they have the sense to not drag it out. However, I feel the author wanted us to suffer. Did she have to make it so long? Did she have to add in so many stupid parts? I don't think so. I really don't. Persephone beats Kronos and gives Tartarus a physical body so it can eat Kronos, who vows to see Persephone later. Hades and Persephone get to have a reunion. Everyone who is asleep wakes up, and Zeus is revealed to, of course, still be alive, because who dies in this? Hades officially asks Persephone to be his girlfriend. Zeus lifts her punishment and thanks her for saving them, and then Hades and Zeus make up. Demeter, forgotten by Persephone, goes to the underworld with Cerberus. Meanwhile, our main couple fixes the underworld by, dancing with glowing eyes. Yeah, whenever my house is a mess, I too just start dancing really badly and then it's all just fixed. Really cool. We finally get a flashback to explain Demeter's hatred of Hades. She was campaigning to be queen of the mortal realm, but Hades voted no and bribed Zeus to vote no. She asked him why, but Hades said because the volcanoes are his. Demeter pleads to trade the volcanoes to him, and Hades is like, to be honest, I actually don't like you. You're ugly and stupid. Demeter vows that when he inevitably wants something from her, she will make sure he cannot get it. I already hated him, and I hate him even more now. Demeter reaches Hades' house where she argues with our main couple to no avail. She stomps back home alone. We pivot over to Minthe. She had a tragic childhood and did a lot of reflection as a plant. When Persephone first restored her, Minthe was like, what the fuck? Fuck you. Persephone began to apologize until Minthe argued this can't be fixed with just an apology. Persephone immediately went, oh well, I don't actually care and I got shit to do. You took years from her, but okay. Minthe is like, man, fuck this bitch, and tries to leave. She finds and helps a lost child get back to the farm. The two have a really cute back and forth. Then Minthe gets roped into teaching a bunch of children, and she ends up being pretty good at teaching. Persephone tries to apologize for yelling, only to immediately regret it. That is not sincere. If you take back an apology as soon as the victim doesn't act nice enough, you were never sincere. She gladly tells Minthe they're stuck, and she's been a plant for 3 years. In the present, adolescent, Thetis, who now has a son, tries to get Minthy to go back to the underworld with her. Minthy refuses as they bring out the worst in each other. She ends the friendship and goes back to teaching the nymphs how to make a resume. Hades meets with Hecate to theorize what happened in the underworld, while Persephone is supposed to be resting. Hecate explains she thinks the underworld fell into disarray because Hades got complacent, no longer checking on Kronos every day. Persephone's power then slowly gave Kronos life, which he used to possess Hades and then convince the god of sleep to knock everyone out. Hecate and Hades decide to look for Thanatos, as he can help them find the god of sleep. Since the trial, Thanatos and Hades were not on talking terms. Flashback time. Thanatos attempted to apologize for his betrayal, and sidebar, I don't see how it's a betrayal at all. You reported someone you don't like for mass murder. It's not like Hades confided in him, or Thanatos was like privy to any secret plans and he, leaked that information. Anyway, Hades wants to know why he did it. Hades is like, I gave you food and a bank account. What more did you need? Thanatos expresses his jealousy of Persephone because Hades was the closest thing he had to a father, literally raised him, but became nothing to him as soon as Thanatos reached adulthood. He treated him like everyone else. Thanatos tried to tell himself that that's just how Hades is with everyone, but then a random pink big booty bitch pops up and Hades is falling all over with compassion. Hades is confused by this because he thought Thanatos didn't like him. You are complaining a child didn't like you? Bro? An abandoned child? Kronos starts to possess Hades, then tells Thanatos he regrets ever taking him in and wishes he drowned him, then says to get the fuck out. So in the present, when Hades and Hecate knock on his door, Thanatos slams it. I don't blame him. Now before this, I thought Daphne was okay all this time, okay? As she lives with Thanatos now, she decides to open the fucking door and invite Hades in. She makes them promise to hear Thanatos out, which Hades reluctantly agrees to. I have an estranged father. I would go fucking feral if my husband betrayed my boundaries to invite him in my house. It's such a big betrayal. Hades apologizes for being an absentee dad, giving the excuse that he just didn't want to end up like Kronos. Thanatos apologizes for being a difficult child, though he was dealing with his mother abandoning him. Hades also tells him that he was possessed by Kronos when he said those horrible things. They end the conversation with Hades inviting Thanatos to family brunch. Now, mind you, how many centuries old is Thanatos? Hades decides just now to talk because he needs something. He didn't come to make amends, he came for a favor. He implores Thanatos to tell him where the sleeping god is. So Hecate, Thanatos, and Hades make their way to find Hypnos in an underworld HR building. Hypnos requests that Hecate take care of his daughter Morpheus, the random dream person from before, to which Hecate agrees. Hypnos informs them that Kronos tricked him into being trapped along with another god who had hypnotizing powers. The god helping Kronos is a child. Persephone during this time bumps into Eros and Daphne. Eros has become a father and gotten married to Psyche. Daphne and him then want to know why Persephone hasn't had sex with Hades yet. They see a giant poster that says Apollo for president. Persephone runs into a bank to terrorize the bank teller, who happens to be one of her old classmates, like she has any reason to be mad. She literally was Hades' dark concubine. Anyway, she apparently has a bunch of money in her bank account, which she uses to buy a seedy apartment complex. We love an investing queen. She excitedly shows the complex to Hades. They then discuss their insecurities and have a frankly wonderful dialogue about each of their boundaries and preferences during sex. I've never seen a couple discuss sex like this in a webtoon, so personally, I have no notes. However, they are soon interrupted by Ares screaming for Persephone outside. Hades confronts him, leading to Ares breaking down to cry over Aphrodite moving on from him. He tries to text her later, but she's seen lying with Hephaestus. Not sure why, but now we get a random backstory. Ares and Aphrodite had a toxic on-off-again relationship, but one day she overheard Ares asking Hera if he can marry Persephone. He later claims it was just for social status, but that led to their final breakup. She blocks Ares after receiving his text before meeting up with Psyche. Now we learn how Aphrodite and Hephaestus meet. She was sad about being unable to do her job in the mortal realm during the banishment So Hephaestus made her a love cannon that can shoot arrows all the way to the mortal realm. That's pretty cool, honestly. What a nice guy. She invites him to a barbecue and the rest is history. What was the fucking point of this? I don't know. I really don't care about these people. Ares leaves, but not before writing a note requiring Persephone to go on a date with him in exchange for him telling her what he knows about fertility goddesses. Hera tries to plan what Persephone should wear for her coronation, as she's now queen of the underworld, and during the meeting, they tell her about Kronos being back. However, we realize that Hera has actually been talking to Kronos in her head all this time. Also during the meeting, Hades calls Hera Bunny. Psyche found a USB that Apollo dropped. We learn Psyche was granted godhood by Zeus in exchange for watching Apollo. She was made the goddess of soul. Now, she is one of the very few black characters, and I know that the original Psyche is the goddess of soul, but this just feels kind of... She takes the USB to Hephaestus, leading them to discover a picture of some random hoe. Psyche leaves to find the woman's identity. Hades and Persephone discuss him calling Hera Bunny, and both of their feelings of jealousy regarding Hera and Ares. Persephone allows Hades to take the form of a butterfly so he can spy on her date with Ares. Ares takes her to a hole in the ground where there's altars dedicated to fertility goddesses. Persephone glances over a painting of Metis before being transported to some fields facing Metis herself. Metis explains some lore. The concept of fertility goddesses was created by Gaia, who fell in love with Oranos. She wanted to give him power. Thus, apparently, love is a prerequisite for using the power given by a fertility goddess, which alleviates Persephone's concerns that Apollo's assault on her would allow him to use her power. Metis? Actually, already don't remember. Oranos. Metis. Hades and Persephone wonder then how Zeus used Metis. But Metis admits to having loved Zeus, who probably ate her to keep the affair quiet from Hera. Metis informs Persephone that her blessing of wrath saved her, as otherwise she would still be on her mother's farm. Metis ends the conversation, leaving Persephone to decide to visit her mother. Demeter hosts an intervention for Persephone, while capturing Hades in moth form. She emotionally manipulates Persephone and becomes a caricature of herself. Demeter has been a helicopter parent, but it feels like she's showing this more extreme emotional abuse to justify her being wrong about the main couple. We, as readers, know Hades genuinely loves Persephone, I guess, because we're omniscient. But in their world, in Demeter's context, it makes sense for her to be skeptical. When she's unable to stop Demeter, Hestia releases Moth Hades. Hades runs to Persephone while she is breaking down. He gives her an honestly beautiful speech, but then proposes marriage by calling back to the time he was owed a personal question at any place, any time. This decision to propose to someone during such an emotionally vulnerable time, literally while their parent is abusing them, is fucking absurd. It's more evidence in my Hades hate arsenal. That is so insanely emotionally manipulative. Of course, she says yes, so they leave and my girl is immediately planning. Demeter placed an embargo on their marriage by alleging that Hades violated the law of Xenia, which is to say he caused a big ruckus in Demeter's home. Everyone realizes the embargo doesn't start until the following day, so they quickly arrange a ceremony for the current day. Everyone's happy, all their friends are invited, obviously not Demeter. Hera gives Persephone her dream dress. And sorry, but I've never seen anyone so dedicated to not serving like Persephone. This dress is the most underwhelming dress ever, and it just looks so bad. Oh my god. I don't know what happened here, but season 3's art has dropped the ball hard. More on that later. Our main couple give their vows and kiss. This third season, deadass, could have been an email. Each chapter feels like nothing is happening. It's been like this since the beginning of season 2, but holy shit, free me. Hades and Persephone do the deed, I guess. We realize Demeter kinda saw the wedding from a distance. We also learn her hatred of Hades started when Zeus blamed Hades for choosing Hera over Demeter as queen of the gods. A lie, and it feels like it's one that's here to soften the other reason she very validly hates Hades. Demeter attempts to complain to Hestia, but Hestia's not having it. She's like, girl, you're acting like a crazy bitch. I don't want to listen to this shit. Our main couple refuses a honeymoon to instead catch up on work. Persephone wants to delegate tasks. She does so by taking Hermes to find 3 mortal sons of Zeus to be the new judges of the underworld. Hermes apologizes for leaving her alone with Apollo, saying he lives in a new apartment so she can visit him without fear anytime now. They have a cute little friend moment, and I think maybe Hermes is one of the only good people in this. One of 2. So let's zoom on over to Lauke. She's the random woman Zeus tried to marry off to Hades because she looks like Persephone. She gets the idea to have an affair with Hades, so she applies to be his assistant. Hades is like, bitch, I'm married. Persephone is undergoing a dream dive with Morpheus, the dream goddess. The plan is to dive into Persephone's dream, then go to Kronos' dream to find out information about the child god helping him. Persephone tries to reach out to a child, but Kronos RKOs her out of nowhere, out of the dream. She gets transported into the memory of her eating the pomegranate to make a deal with Tartarus, who gave her the power as a one-time deal to defeat Kronos. Upon waking, she very thoughtfully summarizes everything for us. Hades gets to fill the assistant position because Hephaestus's AI applied for the job because she wants money, which makes no sense. Persephone bounced and started giving Hades a bit of the cold shoulder through text, which makes him nervous. At first, Persephone pretends to be sick when he calls, but then she admits she messed up. She asks him to see her at her apartment and promptly introduces him to baby Dionysus. So after the dream dive, Zeus ordered Persephone to meet him at her apartment. He was pregnant and literally going into labor, with the baby hiding in his leg. She reluctantly helps him deliver the baby, which Zeus wants to give to the nymphs that raised him. Persephone argues those nymphs aren't even present anymore and forcibly keeps the baby. She apologizes to Hades for making such a huge decision without him. Ares comes to say no one can find Thanatos. Persephone, who was supposed to be watching the baby, pays Lauke a visit. She threatens her for flirting with her husband. Lauke is scum, sure, but the fact that she's afraid Persephone will kill her is crazy. She says,
I don't have time for the paperwork.
Like a flex, and I hate it. Hades and Ares find Thanatos trapped somewhere stupid. They encounter Demeter, who begs them to pass on that she loves and misses Persephone. Hades solemnly agrees. At home, Hades asks Persephone if she filled Lauke's apartment with animals. She says maybe, and suddenly he's naked. There was no transition, and this man is so unsexy that I'm considering celibacy. He's so unsexy, he's just ruined sex as a concept. After sex, he passes on Demeter's message. This leads to Persephone and Demeter having a therapy appointment together. This is therapy depiction number 3. Like, let's go, author, mental health queen. Demeter spills, to be honest, but we ignore what she's right about and focus on her relationship with her mother, her pressures on Persephone, and the intervention. Fair, but Persephone still sucks, and we never get to actually address any of those complaints. They pretty much make up afterwards, and then speaking of family matters, Artemis meets Apollo to ask about Persephone. All he says is she said yes, which Artemis rightfully takes as admission that he assaulted her. I'm sorry for how wham bam bam these scenes are. I feel we're constantly going back and forth and it sounds disjointed, but this is how it was written. I know I also got less detailed in my notes at this point because I was really rushing to finish this goddamn story, and I really do hope it's not too hard to follow. Hestia visits Hera, who finally admits that Kronos is haunting her. Hades and Persephone prepare to do a sleep dive, where Kronos very instantly takes over Hades' body. Like, why did they think this was a good idea? Are they stupid? Kronos in Hades' body tries to hold Persephone hostage and demand they bring Hera, but Hades breaks free by producing some random-ass crystals from his back. The main couple reunite, allowing Hades to explain that he felt childhood emotions in the dream, which let Kronos in. Because he hurt Persephone during this, later he puts makeup on her bruises to cover it for an event. That was a weird scene. Hera summons Persephone to confide in the extent she had to go to and how he's convinced that she's in love with him. They bond over their shared trauma. But during this, Apollo gets some prophecies from a random hoe named Cassandra. Eros and Psyche follow him, realizing Cassandra is the one in the picture on Apollo's USB. They ask her later about her discussion with Apollo, and she says she told him about an extremely rare herb that can put even gods into a deep sleep. They call Zeus to warn him without telling him not to eat or drink anything, so he instantly eats a poisoned muffin, pulling him into a deep slumber. Persephone, Hades, and Demeter prepare for spring. However, Persephone loses control of her powers and unleashes a fierce winter instead of spring. Everything starts to die. Apollo knew this would happen as he heard about it from Kronos' father, Aranos, who he's somehow in cahoots with. They plan for this to call Persephone's marriage with Hades into question, so then Apollo can force her to marry him. Apollo and Leto threaten to kill Cassandra to Eros and Psyche. Like, these are the only two gods who care about a single human, I guess. So they allow themselves to be jailed in an enchanted dungeon. Zeus's daughter Hebe finds Zeus, with Apollo arriving shortly after. He tells her that she'll be suspected, so she better run, which she does like an idiot. He then calls journalists to the scene. Persephone is attempting to fix spring, but everything she touches turns to rot. She must have given up her spring powers to Tartarus, and Demeter sees this and instantly blames Hades, which, like, go off, queen. Persephone and Hades somberly return home to find everyone threw a birthday party for Persephone. This makes her cry harder. To add salt to the injury, Apollo calls to say Zeus is in a coma and he knows about Persephone's dreadful mistake. Apollo then goes on the news to publicly call for a meeting of the gods. Hades attends the meeting with an earpiece for Persephone as she stays behind with Morpheus and Hecate. They are searching how to find Erebus. I thought he's in Tartarus, so I don't fucking know. Erebus is, like, I guess the god of Tartarus. The meeting is predictably chaos. Ares beefs with Apollo because he knows he has something to do with Hebe's disappearance. Hera doesn't show up, though she is queen of the gods. Apollo declares himself king, and I'm not sure why anyone is even entertaining this. They're barely challenging him. There's still a fucking queen and two other kings. Demeter crashes the meeting to announce the horrible state of the mortal realm. It's uninhabitable and the humans are dying faster than they can reproduce. Persephone admits it's her fault via Hades' phone, and Apollo says some very valid criticism that she is again the root of the problem. And I feel like the author has Apollo or Demeter say all valid criticism of Persephone, so this way the readers don't want to agree with them or acknowledge they're right. It's a cop-out. Apollo suggests whoever solves this issue gets to be stand-in leader, and again, for some reason, everyone entertains this. They agree. Hera calls to chew Apollo out, but he disrespects her. Hera has an argument with Kronos afterwards. She suddenly becomes really badass during that argument and is all like, no, you suck, you're ugly, you have no job, I hate you, I've never loved you. Which, yeah, true. Then Hera leaves with Hestia to find Hebe. Morpheus apologizes to Persephone for the failure of the last sleep dive. And Persephone is like,
Don't worry, girl, I caused a plague. We good.
Hecate does some magic that somehow finds where Erebus is. He's in old Tartarus, which I really thought we knew. I don't know. So they have to get past Kronos to have an audience with him to find out how to get Persephone's spring powers back. Hades and Persephone go to bed like they got all the time in the world. There's people that are dying Persephone. Hades thinks that he needs to do another sleep dive, which Persephone instantly shuts down. He's like, girl, we gotta do something. She gives an admittedly cute speech and then they have sex. The situation is y'all's fault. I understand stress and adrenaline can lead to sex, but are you kidding me? Demeter finds Hebe in the mortal realm where they then have an extremely contrived conversation about motherhood. Like, you know, when characters start saying some shit that people would not say just to get a story arc over with, what's happening this entire season. Demeter has an epiphany, so she calls Persephone to talk. We find out when Demeter was human, she had a baby that soon died from an infected cut on his foot. This is why she started really going off the deep end on Persephone. Persephone makes a request to Hades, which he obliges by bending the rules to bring the child back to life. Demeter has a tearful reunion with her child, hugs Hades, and thanks him. This was sweet of Hades, I'll give him that. Hera comes to find Hebe, and our main couple leaves. So we're left with Hera, Hestia, and Demeter to talk about their mother, Metis. Hera has a vision of her own death by Kronos, which leads to Persephone getting large and becoming Titan size. Apparently gives our girl a blowout, love that for her. However, in the present, the underworld is bustling due to the overflow of new shades. The news is rightfully blasting Persephone, which stresses her out so much she collapses. Demeter decides to visit Persephone in an effort to comfort her. Persephone is still sad when Morpheus calls and announces she had a breakthrough about how to do the sleep dive. They decide to do it that night, but not before Persephone and Hades have sex first. Hecate attempts to talk Hades and Morpheus out of the sleep dive because all the other ones went so well. Hades and Hecate do admittedly have a very cute friendship moment before the dive begins. Morpheus gets instantly taken over by Kronos as soon as they start. Like, the epiphany was just Kronos talking to her, leading Hades and Morpheus to get taken away and disappeared. During a meeting between the two, Orenos gives Apollo a plan to get Persephone to be his and solve the plague. Apollo calls a meeting of the gods once more. This time, Hades is gone, Persephone has to go. She arrives to protesters chanting against her and Apollo broadcasting the meeting. He asks Persephone to come up for a demonstration, which she clearly can't refuse because this is all in public. He touches her arm and uses some powers. Together, they create the powers of spring. To everyone's horror, he orders Persephone to marry him so they can fix the plague. Everyone's like, huh? Hera interrupts to proclaim she's still queen and she will fix this without Apollo by going to Tartarus because Kronos will show her the way. Persephone's like,
Oh my god, girl, you don't have to do this. We can figure something else out.
However, Apollo gives Hera 24 hours. She says she can do it in 12. Why are we listening to him exactly? Hera takes this time to write letters to everyone because she knows she's gonna die. She says bye to Zeus, who's still in a coma, and then Echo, the assistant, comes and is like, what the fuck are these letters? And then they kiss? Okay, I didn't realize Hera just needed some good nymph lovin' to cure her racism. It didn't work for my parents, I'll tell you that. Artemis comes and gives Persephone her old jacket Hestia stole way back in the beginning. She follows her and says she's gonna fight too. Anyway, they go to the area, and there's a ton of random ass people there, and Persephone's like,
Oh my god, you all came, thanks.
and everyone's like,
So special, Persephone, we're here for you.
who are these people? They open a door to ancient Tartarus. I swear I ain't ever seen this door in my life. But Hera gets sucked in with Persephone before anyone else can follow. Like no shit that would happen. Dionysus, Zeus's knee baby, tries to show all the adults something, but no one listens to him. He gobbles down some wine, turns into a snake, and slithers through the door that took Persephone and Hera. Is no one watching this baby? Meanwhile, Hades is a child, and Kronos is verbally abusing him. Hades sees a blue child in the same place that he thinks is himself. Hera and Persephone descend Tartarus, where apparently it will crush them due to the pressure if they go too fast. God physiology is really confusing to me in this. And they're like, who could have predicted Kronos would lie and take us? Oh no. He is so real for calling them stupid bitches. Persephone is like, I rotted Apollo from the inside, and that's why he was bleeding from his eyes earlier when we duoed the power of spring. Like, girl, what? That was not clear. One thing that really grinds my gears about magic and stories like this is they just be making shit up. It's never consistent. Anyway, Hera calls out to Kronos to distract him while Persephone very obviously goes behind him. What follows is the stupidest and worst done fight scene of all time. I believe I said that about the previous fight with Kronos, but this one actually does top it. Hera gets crushed by Kronos apparently, though she looks fine, to be honest. It's very not emotional and super forced. Girl, we do not care. Persephone stops attacking Kronos to bring Hera to a small cave. She sees Dionysus walking by Kronos, runs out the cave, and brings him into it too. Kronos deadass don't see any of this. Hera is literally not even dead yet, like the sadness lasts 2 seconds before it's very clear Hera's not gonna die. Dionysus shows Persephone his grapevine. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but Persephone had accidentally rotted his vine when she lost her powers. Now it's back to normal, and she realizes she's been using her powers wrong because they changed. She has to kill something to revive it, or some dumb shit. This makes no sense to me because then shouldn't everything she killed be revived by now? Like all the plants? She tries to revive Hera. Hera realizes she's a fertility goddess, and she felt sick all the time because Zeus was hiding her power. Since he made a deal with Metis, that's also why he ate Metis on the condition that he won't use Hera's fertility powers. Hera revives and becomes big and fights Kronos like in the vision. So it was not Persephone. She looks really fucking stupid, but anyway, she's big and she's ready to rumble. Hades meets the interloper child, and it's his daughter from the future. Because like time works differently for some reason there, since Kronos is the god of time. She's also deaf and speaks sign language, which Hades conveniently knows too. I must say that depicting motion like signing hands is clearly not a strong suit for the author. Hades' daughter says Kronos uses her powers to hurt people and he stole her from the future. In her time though, she's only been here a few days. Hades is like, oh my god. Then Hades' mom, Rhea, appears and is like, oh my god, I'm from the past and Kronos brought me here too. Hello, son. I don't get why he brought her, but they have a tearful reunion and she reassures him he can use Persephone's power without hurting her because he loves her. And Hades had been fearful all this time of abusing that power because he didn't want to turn out out like his father. Persephone cheers on Hera, and Kronos is like, oh, you're coming to me. Hades is also fighting a version of Kronos somehow. Like, I don't fucking know. He says some super fucking on-the-nose therapy bullshit that no one would say in real life. He then forgives Kronos and turns him into a diamond, while Hera rains on Kronos with light or something and kills him. Morpheus finds Hades only for him to ask her to make this all seem like a dream to Melanoi, his daughter, and gives her the Kronos diamond to take back. Kronos apologizes to Hera, and she's like, I don't give a fuck, which is pretty real, honestly. Persephone goes to the mortal realm to fix it, but Apollo stops her. He grabs her and ties her up. She suspiciously lets him and cries while he reads her for filth, but we can't agree because it's Apollo saying it. Anyway, he shows her a true love arrow he's gonna use on her, but she uses a vine to pick the arrow up and stab him with it when he wasn't paying attention. It was kind of cool, I guess, but also stupid. Anyway, Apollo is overrun with guilt now because he genuinely loves her and agrees he did something atrocious. She says she never wants to see him again and orders him to tell the world the truth of what he did, so he does on national TV. Demeter, Ares, and a bunch of nymphs beat Apollo as Persephone goes on to heal the mortal realm. Ouranos then is like, whoops, well, I'll take his body now, and somehow kind of just does, except he doesn't actually because he just becomes big and he's like using Apollo spiritually as a vessel. I don't even understand how Ouranos is doing all this as he was supposed to be dead. So Ouranos Paulo hits Persephone and she tries to summon Hades by stomping on the ground. Hades is summoned, they kiss. He's like,
I know how to use our powers together.
She thinks she must power him up, but he says,
No, I'm a feminist. I'll give my powers to you.
She gets big with a fancy dress for some fucking reason. One thing about Persephone, she gonna have a new dress every fight. This would slay if all the dresses didn't look terrible. Helios appears out of nowhere and starts fighting Ouranos too. Persephone grows grass to cover the world in spring again. Hera comes back and she's like, damn, this is crazy. She's still big, but now she's in a fancy dress too. Oh my god, Persephone's impact. Hera meets with Persephone and they're like,
We can't do this alone. We need the pussy squad.
So somehow they touch hands and summon Metis and then Rhea, like who the fuck knows how. They all join hands and summon Gaia together, and Gaia's a powerful ass bitch who instantly takes Apollo from Ouranos and gives him to Artemis. And Apollo is a sperm. Anyway, we barely even see Ouranos die, so I didn't realize he did at first. It was very anticlimactic. Gaia asked to meet with Persephone, who is small now. Gaia announces she can bring everyone who died from the plague back to life, which is what? How? Isn't that logistically a huge deal? Isn't that forbidden? Didn't we make a really big deal about this before? What about all the work the underworld did to make room for those new shades? What about all the humans who believed most of the world died, prepared for that, and now are suddenly overrun with a bunch of returned souls? Gaia orders Persephone to do 3 months in the mortal realm, spring, and the rest of the year in the underworld. Our main couple is sad, but they're allowed to visit each other unlike last time. We time skip 3 months. Persephone and Hades reunite. They have a coronation ceremony for Persephone. We get the blah 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 on how everyone is doing. Dionysus is for some reason fully grown and is reunited with some bitch who I don't know from nowhere. Demeter is chill with her new baby. Apollo is disgraced and forced to do community service by fixing temples in the mortal realm. Ares is the same as always. Hera is still queen, but Zeus is a figurehead now, and Hera is with Echo. Artemis is hanging out with some random bitch Selene, goddess of the moon. Thanatos and Hades acknowledge each other more. The goddesses of eternal maidenhood, which was the weird virgin sex cult, disbanded. Eros and Psyche are still looking for the mortal Cassandra, which is like, why? Y'all barely knew her. Hades and Persephone have an awful panel of a love confession, and they remain forever in love. No idea what happened to Minthe, Eris, and Hebe. Time skip again many years, and Melanoi is around when Hades and Persephone have another daughter. The end. Finally. My review will be in 3 parts. Let's just get this out of the way. This is not me saying I can do better. I am a humble reader, just telling you what I like and don't like on a personal scale. This work is better than I could do. I can't stick to making a comic at all. Doesn't make it above criticism. We will be discussing art, which is similar to discussing the writing style of a book. If you hold this comic dear to your heart and will take all this very personally, Don't. Here we go. Visuals. The author has never been strong with anatomy, but earlier chapters of Lore Olympus thrived because of her unique shape language, use of colors, and dreamy, hazy art style. Character silhouettes were much stronger in the beginning as well. Not every female character had the same hourglass figure. It's not often that someone gets away with extreme stylization to hide bad anatomy, but I think it worked in the beginning of Lore Olympus. Inevitably, someone may ask how I could say that the author's anatomy isn't great without providing proof. I'll get to it later. Point being, the beginning of Lore Olympus had charm to it. It's easy to see why it became so popular. Nobody else was doing it like this. The author's painterly techniques, wispy style, and bleeding colors faded over time. Her lines got much more defined and clean. Perhaps that works when your fundamentals are strong, but that was not the case. It's sort of like how artists always lament the sketch is better than the line art, because sketches are more forgiving and they hide more mistakes, and all the extra shaky lines contribute to an overall feeling of flow. The art started to really change during season 2, in my opinion. It's been on a downhill slope since then. The author has several assistants, and all these artists together should ideally be able to create beautiful work. Unfortunately, things just look haphazard. I feel it's quite obvious that there is no reference sheet for these characters, so therefore none of their designs are consistent. Between Hades' nose, Minth's boobs, Persephone's entire body, and everything else constantly changing, really the only defining feature that each character has to set them apart is their color scheme. Except Hades. I could pick him out in a lineup. A police lineup. Speaking of Hades, his nose. This thing shapeshifts like nobody's business. I don't even understand it. I can only assume it's so exaggerated for some long nose fetish. In my opinion, devastatingly unattractive. And as a crooked nose girly, it's not about his nose being different. It's the sheer size of it. It is a caricature of itself. Hades is made to look like a giant next to Persephone, and sure, they have the whole big guy, small girl thing going on, but why is it that she has to look like a toddler? But it's not only next to Hades. Persephone is child size next to any character in the first season. For as much as I praised the art style in the first season, let us circle back to it. This season did its utmost to constantly remind us that Persephone is so little and Hades is so old. The poses, the dialogue, everything came together to portray Persephone as young as possible. She felt so fetishized. Eyes were at their biggest this season to a comical degree. And her body type truly fluctuated a magnificent amount of times. Sometimes she felt built very mid-size, other times she's a size 00 with a huge chest. I can get behind gods purposely changing their body types on a whim, but that was never established. In fact, Hera was the only person established as having shape-shifting powers. These inconsistencies are purely due to negligence. Then we have that so many women in this comic look exactly like Persephone, especially Hades' mom, though that one I fear is not an accident. There's a same face problem within anime styles, and that's well known, right? I mean, I suffer from it. But this comic takes it a step further than that. No character has a discernible style at all, or even other colors on them to help them stand out. Everyone is one color. I hate to pull up the game Hades as an example. I feel like it's gotta be done. We all know the comparisons. The gods in this game are distinct as hell. I have never played it. I'm not that much of a gaming girly, but the designs each have their own personality, and you can tell a lot about the character not just by their accessories, but by how they carry themselves too. Lore Olympus didn't even attempt this. Sure, it's a modern setting, and they're wearing regular clothes, but that's not exactly an excuse for literal gods to not have an individual style. There are no accessories, nothing that separates the style between two characters. Hades and Hecate are the only ones that are somewhat recognizable by their outfit choices, by virtue of them being the only ones in the same suits all the time. I think the author really put effort in scenes surrounding Persephone's grief, and I appreciate that care. I've tried to acknowledge it when I see it, but this fizzled out. Season 3's art didn't feel like the result of a changing art style, but rather like she was just fucking done. So this is pure speculation, but man, I think in season 1 the author loved this story, but by season 3 it almost feels like hatred. It reads like it was a chore to make, which makes it feel like a chore to read. Many artists lose steam as the story goes on, which is understandable. It's an incredibly demanding job, and I'll never understand what they go through. Artistic burnout is not a moral failing, but unfortunately, it ultimately still impacts impacts the reading experience. Without the painterly strokes and colors, the anatomy problems in season 3 are very obvious. The author's art never felt like she fully understood fundamentals, but she worked that into her style more before. Now we're left without the style and just the glaring lack of fundamentals. I feel like the author did a good job on paneling too. That's a huge strength of hers. I never felt the backgrounds, lack of detail in them were distracting either. As an artist, backgrounds and hands are my worst enemy. Relatably, the hands in Lore Olympus have many problems. Inconsistency, a changing number of fingers, sizing that's either way too small or awfully massive. To be honest, sometimes they're just drawn as obscure nubs. Persephone is allegedly not a little person, but rather someone of average height. Here is the height of an average woman. Artists like to call height as a certain number of heads, meaning you take their head size and stack that a number of times to get a person's height. The average range falls between 6 to 8 heads. Persephone is this many heads, while Hades is this many. While the childlike aura is purposeful, surely Persephone being 2 feet tall at random times was not. I give the art a 6 out of 10 in the beginning and a 3 out of 10 by the end. From this point on, I have nearly nothing good to say. So much so that I'm unsure where to even start. You know when you're so much of a hater, you're like, where do I even begin? That's me. Persephone at the beginning is portrayed as friendly, innocent, and worryingly naive. She literally didn't know what sleeping your way to the top is. She's the most beautiful, of course, and the most powerful girl boss ever. But she doesn't know how beautiful she is, and she's humble. Persephone is a vegetarian who didn't want to wear a fur coat. She's also a rich heiress that refuses to use her family's money and wants to make her own way because she's not superficial. But if Hades asks more than once, fine, she'll reluctantly use his blood money every time. Persephone's initial depiction was an off-white dress that portrays her innocence, whereas Minthe was shown negatively while being comfortable with her sexuality. Persephone proceeds to dress in her hoe era for most of the comic, which I love a good hoe era, but why was the demonization of Minthe there in the first place? My girl Minthe was supposed to be seen as a superficial gold digger. Wow, Hades bought her an apartment. She only wants new bags. She looks so slutty. Does Hades not later buy everything for Persephone? Does he not take her on multiple shopping sprees? Does she not ask for a shopping spree? I just feel there's so many inconsistencies with how other women are portrayed, demonizing things they do only for Persephone to do it later. And that's not acknowledged. Persephone is such a fucking hypocrite. Remember how she flirted non-stop with Hades in the beginning? She knowingly engaged in an emotional affair, not caring that he was taken. Don't worry, he will get his lashings too. But she wanted him and never made an effort to hide it. Meanwhile, when Lauke covets Hades, Persephone ruins her fucking house and implies she can kill her. Yes, it was shady, but you did the same goddamn thing. So why are you mad? That's your twin. The story rewards her for being Hades' mistress, everyone loves her, and all the problems she causes magically go away at the end. She's a Mary Sue and a self-insert, but somehow one of the most unlikable ones ever. She turns Minthe into a plant and has the nerve to act like her life was ruined, like she's been wronged. Bitch, if my husband had a side hoe who engaged in mass murder, I'd report her too. The fuck? What would she do if the roles were reversed? The story teaches us that it's a girl boss feminism moment when Persephone has moments of wrath. Any other woman to do it is in the wrong. Persephone is the picture of white feminism. She doesn't actually care about any issues unless they affect her. Misogyny is a huge theme in this story, the mistreatment of women. We're supposed to root for these wealthy women in power as they fight back against awful men. But I'm not just a woman, personally. I'm biracial. I didn't grow up wealthy. I don't identify with Persephone or Hera, but rather the woman they stepped on along the way. I can go on about this bitch forever, but let's move on to one of her victims. Minthe was in a relationship with her boss who pays for her whole life, who has given her the only stable job she's ever had, all the only nice things she's ever owned. Hades enjoyed that she was broken. She points that out. He was going to propose without asking. He was going to publicly propose at a party in front of a ton of powerful bitches who hate Minthe because they're racist. Yet as soon as the next young, vulnerable hoe comes along, Hades immediately forgets Minthe's existence. Minthe was purposely portrayed as emotionally abusive and unlikable. It had to be that way, so we think it's right that Persephone swoops in. We're supposed to see Minthe as insecure, and when she is, that's fucking cringe. But when Persephone is, that's our vulnerable queen. However, I find Minthe more complex complex and more interesting. She got done extremely dirty in the finale by being completely thrown away. We don't even know how she ended up in the future. And did Persephone ever pay any form of compensation for the years Minthy lost as a plant? Of course not. Minthy did emotionally and physically abuse Hades. Hades himself is a despicable person. In this world, with gods and mortals, the acceptable level of violence is entirely inconsistent. Hecate slaps Hades, and that's okay. Hades owns slaves and rips out a student's eyeball. This is fine. But Minthy's slap is irredeemable. Persephone can trap Minthy into a plant body, taking years off of her life in an act of violence. I'd argue this is way worse than a slap. Persephone can imply that she'll kill Lauke. These are all okay, even encouraged by the readers. It seems again that violence is only okay when our main couple does it. Demeter. They can never make me hate you. She's a helicopter parent, but Persephone is 19 when everyone else is at minimum centuries old. She's a fucking baby to Demeter. She's a baby to everyone except the men in this comic, which should really say something. Demeter stifled Persephone and definitely caused her to run off the way she did. She did not cause the mass murder or the plague, though. That's all on Persephone. I'm Demeter, and my child, barely legal in human terms, wants to run off with an old fucking man. I'm gonna be furious, scared. Persephone wanted to go to college, but what even was her degree? Did she ever get it? She truly did just fall in love with Hades, and the rest of her life was put on hold. I would also see Hades as a predator. The intervention was disgusting and purposeful character assassination. Demeter had extremely valid reasons for hating Hades, yet in therapy, all we talk about is Demeter's mother instead of confronting any of the truths that she said about Persephone's man. I don't have much to say about Demeter besides that. I do hate her color scheme though, sorry. The men in this story are all a travesty, excluding Hephaestus and Hermes. Every man in this story otherwise sees women as objects, things to possess, and keep, including Hades. Ares is shown to be a creep multiple times, but we're supposed to like him for some reason. He also can't take no for an answer, so why do we like him? Apollo is obviously a villain, he fucking sucks, what he did was unforgivable. But season 3 Apollo felt like the author was dumping all of the critics' words into him. It felt like he was a critic surrogate, so this way we're afraid to agree. I don't know if that's like the association fallacy or what, I feel like it should have a name, but you know, the author makes an unlikable character say all the things that haters are thinking, so this way haters look bad. It's a very cheap trick to prevent people from agreeing with the valid criticism that he says, because a horrible man said it. Artemis spends so much of the story as a useless fool, someone who keeps hurting her roommate over and over. She knows Persephone hates her brother, yet continues to invite him over. I have a brother. If my friend didn't like him, and especially if we had a no men allowed policy, he wouldn't be invited over. It's that simple. I would go to his place. She sees Persephone's discomfort and ignores it willingly. I don't believe she ever properly apologized for it. Maybe she did. If she did, it was underwhelming, and that's why I don't remember it. It didn't even hit my notes. So for this woman who has never helped another woman in her life to then get a Protector of Women award, so jarring. We don't even get the satisfaction of seeing her actually confronting Apollo, which we were waiting for hundreds of chapters. Instead, we see that scene from his perspective of all things. His perspective. Hera, she's also our other girl boss feminism queen, but she's literally a rich old lady who hates minorities. Like, I'm sorry, that's just what she is. She can choke. Oh, but don't worry, she gets over her racism off screen by dating a nymph. Are you fucking kidding me? One, we never get the justice of seeing her actually confronted about her bigotry. Especially Minthy never gets that justice. God forbid Minthy get anything. Two, we don't even learn if or when her mind changes about nymphs. We just see that now she's fucking one. All I see is that Echo is now one of the good ones. This is one of the most offensive plot lines to me on a personal level. Narratively, we're supposed to like her. It's very clear. She taught her child how to mix her alcoholic drinks. Like, that's not cute. But this is literally never brought up. Instead, let's spend 10 more chapters about why Demeter is the worst. Eros, I hate. He's just as pushy as every other man in the story. Psyche deserved better. Speaking of Psyche, we had to cover it. Psyche became black. Unless she had a silk press in the beginning, my girl suddenly lost her bone straight hair, and now she wears afro styles. So one of the two only black characters was an afterthought. One who is Eros's beautiful trophy that he locked up, and Aphrodite's underling. And don't forget, she also becomes the goddess of soul. I just feel it was an odd choice for her to be made into one of the only black characters. This was the author's extremely low-effort way of addressing criticism about lack of diversity. Dionysus felt like such a pointless interjection. Persephone adopted him for all of 5 seconds, and then I guess he was no longer a part of their family. It's entirely unclear who raised him, but seeing as he wasn't there with their little family at the end, I fear it was not our main couple. What does the author have against adopted children? Thanatos also got shat on. He's way too fucking good for Daphne. He deserved his anger against Hades. Again, why is only Persephone allowed to be wrathful about being wronged? These two are the world's shittiest adoptive parents. Thanatos deserves a little wrath as a treat. Yes, his birth mother sucked, but you know who else sucked? The man who agreed to raise him and proceeded to give him no love whatsoever and then pretend he didn't exist as soon as he became an adult. Eris is another underutilized character. I actually liked her, but she was gone very fast. They made a huge deal about her being feared for the chaos and destruction she causes, but she did nothing of the sort. I realized I forgot to write about Zeus. Like, he sucks. Yeah, Zeus is an awful person. I think the story mostly acknowledges that Zeus is awful. However, we're still supposed to kind of like him. Like, he's never actually confronted by the fact that he's awful by anyone. It might be acknowledged, but he's not really confronted with it. Definitely never held accountable. And at the end, he's king of the gods, but he's only a figurehead. They don't really explain how or why he's only a figurehead and what that means. What that means his duties are and Hera's new duties are. Yeah, Zeus was a mess, I feel. And other characters, to be honest, I can't even think of them right now. I feel like all the women who are coded to be young adults are enemies of Persephone except Artemis, but their friendship fizzled out very fast due to her actions. All other characters are extremely one-dimensional and not really worth talking about. Hades. I've been waiting for this one. Let me start by saying I enjoy dark romances. I'm into trash men in stories. I'm not into age gap, clearly, but I like a good morally gray or even evil character. Hades, however, is not that. He fawns over Persephone immediately, and other gods treat him like a harmless cinnamon roll. Zeus believes Hades deserves Persephone as a treat. Persephone even remarks that he's
kind, compassionate, and full of empathy.
Demeter is the only person who calls him out, and she's demonized for it. The story never disproves any of her complaints. Instead, it shifts the subject every time. Hades was never kind to women that he was not going to sleep with, besides Hecate. His workers are terrified of them. He treats them like garbage. He has unpaid interns, and I won't let anyone forget he uses slave labor and then punishes souls for being poor. Hades loves the fact that he corrupted Persephone and endearingly calls her a dread queen. Demeter pointed out that Hades was going to corrupt Persephone, so was she wrong? Persephone was a sweet, if naive girl at the beginning of the story, but now she's an evil bitch who just throws her power around those weaker than her by the end of the story, just like Hades. Hades fantasizes about marrying and having children with a 19-year-old that he knew for 10 days, despite the fact that he abandoned his adopted son and he was already seeing someone. He's constantly involved with women who are at least emotionally vulnerable. He knew Hera was miserable with his brother, so he slept with her for millennia. If he was 18 when he met Hera, and he's over 2000 now, and he only stopped sleeping with Hera in the 80s, he's been fucking his brother's wife for a long ass time. Minthe was a poor woman who he made his fucking secretary. He had complete financial control over her. He never made any effort to stop his family's racist remarks, and instead made her endure it. He was going to publicly propose in front of those same people, knowing the ridicule she would get, without even talking to her about it. Wild. Let's not forget when he publicly proposed to Persephone during one of her lowest points. He then allowed the wedding to be escalated to the very next day. How is that not insane? How is that not taking advantage of these women and the situations that they're in? He also knew Persephone wanted to live separately and date like a regular couple, but he immediately took that away from her too. All she did was make concessions for him. Let's be reminded again that she quit school because of their relationship. And yes, again, he went for Persephone at her most vulnerable point in the beginning too. He was self-aware enough to acknowledge for a single page that he shouldn't lust after a teenager, yet he still went for her. Knowing how sheltered she was, knowing how inexperienced, knowing how she quite literally just moved to a whole new realm. Hades is riddled with hypocrisy. He acknowledges what a horrible thing the intervention held by Demeter was, and validates Persephone's feelings on it. But then he had no problem telling Thanatos' family business on a live stream to every single realm. He had no problem using Thanatos despite knowing how he felt. He had no problem with Daphne completely trampling Thanatos' boundaries. Even though Hades never really holds Zeus accountable, he clearly does think he's better than him. He holds a low opinion of Zeus for cheating, yet he accompanies Zeus on trips to get more women. He enables the behavior by going along with it, and then sleeps with Zeus's wife to comfort her? That's like the lowest of the low. He has an affair with a married woman. He has an emotional affair and carries it on for the entire first season and never feels a shred of guilt. And he's better than Zeus? How? I feel like I could go on forever about why I hate this big, ugly, decrepit old man, and it still wouldn't be enough. So let me move on. I give the characters a solid 4 out of 10 because they suck for sure, but there are moments of potential in there. Story. Well, there certainly is a story in images. Whether it's a cohesive plot or not, debatable. I'd say Lore Olympus is confused. It didn't know what it wanted to be. It started off as a drama, mostly between an office and school. This is admittedly where the story was the best, plot-wise. There was somehow less filler, even though the stakes were lower. But suddenly, Lore Olympus attempts to raise the stakes. I have heard that pressure can be put on webtoon authors to raise the stakes in their stories, which can sometimes cause the plot to suffer. Either way, the shift did it no favors. The author struggles to clearly depict action scenes, and as said earlier, they're drawn in such a way to be a chore to see. The characters all started having these insane monologues, really just say the themes of the story instead of showing us through actions. The plot itself is also riddled with holes. What is even the power level of these gods? What exactly are their abilities, and what makes one stronger than the other besides if they get big, they're strongest? So Kronos is a god of time, but he only uses that power to steal Melanoi in some dreamlike place, but not in the battle with Hera. Hera can transform into people, but only that one time she pretended to be Persephone. No one else can do this, probably. Eros shoots arrows, so does Apollo, but like Eros's arrows do stuff. Hades has red eyes sometimes, and he got big once, and he also put a man's eyeball back in his skull, fully functioning. But somehow that wasn't healing, because it's a huge deal when Persephone heals Ares. Hecate uses magic, which is different from everyone else's magic, because she's a witch, and it's just different. Morpheus fucks up dreams. She can't control them or stop them. Zeus is like lightning. Demeter does spring, but so does Persephone. Persephone can heal people, float. I think she's like the only one to constantly fly. Get big, turn bitches into plants, make spring, make things rot. Gods rot from the inside. And let's not forget when she and Hades danced, which fixed the entire underworld, because it did. I see who the favorite is here. It's like there's no magic system, which is fine. Not everything has to have a detailed system for their magic, but it's also just fucking all over the place. It's completely unclear what the limits are for each person, what actually fucking kills these gods, what it means when they're dead, because they were all just there in the last chapter, so who knows? And even what the fuck is a fertility goddess? They can give their loved ones powers, or they can just get really big. What does that mean? What does that shit do? I don't get it. And with a fucked up understanding of magic, there's the fucked up morality of this. Zero consistency for what's acceptable in this world. I think it's very easy to attempt to defend this inconsistent morality with,
Well, they're gods. Of course they think differently from humans.
I'm so fine with gods being awful. I've said before that I want them to think differently from humans. I want them to have less empathy for human problems. But these guys act almost entirely human. The gods in this comic act exactly how people do, with the caveat that they occasionally say,
We don't care about mortals.
I feel even this mirrors humanity though, except it just reads like the story is a metaphor for wealthy people stomping all over poor people without seeing them as worthy of life. How is the morality of this world so inconsistent? Apollo's crime is rightfully scorned, but we fucking know Zeus and Poseidon did that shit too. The author literally references Poseidon's assault on Demeter, and it's played for laughs. Artemis and Apollo murdering a bunch of people is similarly funny. Eros and Psyche sacrifice themselves for one woman, which Apollo expected of them. Persephone turns Minthe into a fucking plant, that's so funny. But Apollo caused Daphne to be a tree, and that was horrible. Hades rips out a student's eyeball with Hecate, but it's awful when Minthe slaps Hades. The nymphs are constantly discriminated against, which is literally never addressed, but it's such a tragedy that Persephone's nymph sisters died, the ones who exist only to help Persephone. The prejudice that people have towards Persephone in the beginning while she's in school is wrong, but again, racism against nymphs is okay. The gods all commit atrocious acts, and only some are we actually supposed to read as bad? Why should I be satisfied with Apollo's crime gets meager justice, but Zeus walks free? Hera is victimized for Zeus's treatment of her. The way he let her be sick all the time, the way he's cheated on her with literally everyone, including her own mother, yet Zeus himself is never truly held accountable. I believe part for why we look the other way for these crimes is because they're happening to people other than Persephone, our heroine. Things only matter when they're done to Persephone. No one has to hold Zeus accountable because he apologized for the one time he hurt Persephone. Everything else be damned. Our main couple loves telling each other,
You can be bad, but you choose not to.
is that not the fucking default? There are so many weird things about this story. I can understand if this was a psychological thriller or drama about Persephone's corruption arc. It's not though. This is very plainly, very obviously supposed to be a cute, romantic, self-insert feminist retelling. I give the story a 5 out of 10 in the beginning and a 2 out of 10 later. The total average is like 4 out of 10, which feels a little high for how miserable of a time I had with the last 150 chapters. So Lore Olympus, for me, was not the romance of all time. I read it for y'all, and I'd never willingly read it again. I'd only recommend it if you're like really into long-nosed blue old men or something. That's a very niche fetish, so I'd understand if you had to get it there. This took forever to make. Some of my points I'd like to credit some of you guys for giving me those ideas, and also the subreddit cross-checking those criticisms with my notes helped me a lot. If you liked this video, please physically leave a like and maybe subscribe. If you didn't like it and you came this far, that's dedication to haterism that I have to respect. Comment to tell me what you think I should read next. I'll do whatever has the highest amount of likes. I could regret saying that, but please be nice to my soul. I am so very tired after this. Please be kind. Bye. This one is really for the haters.